A ghastly discovery in their Ohio home.
Me and my wife just found a dead body in our freezer.
What did we just hear? In the frosty depths of the freezer, amidst the chilling hum, they discovered not frozen delights, but a dead body. What whispered of secrets long preserved in icy silence?
Oh, 911, what is your emergency?
Yeah, my name is Kevin. I live in Cam, Ohio.
Okay.
Me and my wife just found a dead body in our freezer.
Dead body in
Freezer
the
up.
freezer?
Yeah.
All right, it's okay, sir. Is it a male? Is it a female?
I think it's a female. I need a camel police here right away.
We just listened to a terrifying 911 call, which was made on July 29, 2017. Before delving into the details of this call, let's address the essential elements. What, when, where, why, and who? Let us take you back to June 22nd, 2017, from where it all started.
In June of 2017, the Youngstown Police Department gets a call of a missing adult.
A missing adult? Yeah, right. You just heard that. Youngstown Police Department received a call regarding a missing adult, initiating the beginning of a compelling story. The question arises, who was the missing person?
Shannon Graves was last seen by her family around February of 2017, but the missing persons report wasn't filed until June.
So something was wrong, something was off.
As we move ahead, the detectives started searching for clues in Shannon Graves' disappearance, and they make a surprising discovery.
We discovered that in April of 2017, the Youngstown Police Department towed Shannon's car, and we had actually had it in our impound lot.
Shannon's car was being driven by her boyfriend, Arturo Novoa, and Arturo Novoa committed a traffic violation. There was a police officer present, tried to pull Arturo Novoa over. Arturo Novoa flees. He ditches Shannon's car, gets out of the car and runs, and he's apprehended.
That something else is going on here besides just a missing persons case.
Why did Arturo run away from the cops when they told him to stop? It's important to know he was driving Shannon Graves' car, who happens to be his girlfriend. If he had her car, where was Shannon? As authorities try to contact Arturo Novoa, a suspect in Shannon's disappearance, he avoids them, ignoring his door and phone calls. Then, on July 3rd, 2017, 11 days after Shannon went missing, her ex-fiancé, John Scarata, reached out to detectives.
He came forth with some information in that Arturo also had another girlfriend. We learned that Arturo was dating on and off again for many years, Katrina Layton. And we learned that she was in the picture the same time that Shannon Graves was in the picture. It was your stereotypical love triangle.
Shannon Graves, Arturo Novoa, and Katrina Layton. The tale unfolds with Shannon Elizabeth Graves entering the world on November 4, 1988, as the beloved daughter of Christine Graves and Ronnie DePaul. Within the family, she held a special place as the older sibling, but her affection for her brother AJ was unmatched and unconditional. Their bond was not just that of blood, but a connection woven with love and shared adventures. Among her friends, Shannon was affectionately known as Star, a nickname that captured her radiant personality. Moreover, she was always willing to go to great lengths to help her friends in times of need. Apart from her human connections, Shannon had a deep bond with her puppy, spending countless hours in his company. Their companionship a source of joy and a comfort in her life. Between 2014 and 2016, Shannon was in a relationship with a man named John Scarata and even got engaged. John had a roofing business, but also a criminal history as a drug dealer. He and Shannon parted ways while he was in prison. The exact details of their breakup remained undisclosed, but according to those who knew him, John still harbored feelings for her. In 2016, Shannon achieved a significant milestone by obtaining her cosmetology license from Raphael's School of Beauty in Boardman. Filled with enthusiasm, she looked forward to embarking on a new career in the beauty industry. During that year, she crossed paths with a man named Arturo Novoa, and their connection quickly evolved into a romantic relationship. They decided to share a home at Mahoning Avenue in Youngstown, Ohio. However, their relationship soon took a dark turn when Novoa became abusive, leading to their breakup in December 2016. Novoa moved out of their shared apartment, but just a week later they reconciled, and he was back living at Shannon's. Things were starting to look good for Shannon. However, everything was about to change. 6 months later, on June 22, 2017, the Youngstown Police Department received a call from Shannon's half-sister, Debbie DePaul. Debbie reported Shannon missing, expressing her concern. While it was not uncommon for Shannon to go without contacting her family for extended periods, missing significant events like her birthday and Easter raised red flags for Debbie, prompting her to reach out to the authorities. Even when Shannon's father, Ronnie, contacted Novoa, he claimed that she had moved to Cleveland to be with another man. Furthermore, the family repeatedly attempted to contact Shannon on her phone, but were unsuccessful. By that time, the police were aware that solving the case would be challenging due to the delayed report. Nevertheless, the investigations into the case began in earnest, with authorities putting their full effort into unraveling the mystery. It didn't take the police much time to do a background check and find out that John and Shannon's breakup occurred while he was in prison, causing him distress as per those acquainted with him and Shannon. Adding to the suspicions, John had been released shortly before Shannon was believed to have disappeared. Detective Mike Lambert from the Youngstown Police Department believed that John had both motive and opportunity to do something to Shannon. However, John informed the police that he hadn't seen Shannon since February 2017. He claimed she told him she was giving her relationship with Novoa another chance, but he also admitted to still having romantic feelings for her during their conversation. Due to this, the police couldn't shake their suspicions about John, a person with a criminal past and potential motives. However, lacking concrete evidence, their hands were tied, leaving them unable to take further action. Despite the suspicions from police, John, along with Debbie, was actively assisting the police in their investigation, and soon law enforcement made an intriguing discovery. This finding led them to identify their second potential suspect in the case.
We discovered that in April of 2017, the Youngstown Police Department towed Shannon's car, and we had actually had it in our impound lot.
Shannon's car was being driven by her boyfriend, Arturo Novoa, and that Arturo Novoa committed a traffic violation. There was a police officer present, tried to pull Arturo Novoa over. Arturo Novoa flees. He ditches Shannon's car, gets out of the car and runs, and he's apprehended. Shannon's car is then towed to the impound lot and remained there.
Arturo got a couple of tickets and was released on the scene.
The police conducted a search of the vehicle, hoping to find clues about Shannon's disappearance. But what they discovered would completely alter their initial perspective on the case.
We found a series of cardboard box tops, and we were able to determine that they had contained bottles of drain cleaner, which was mainly sulfuric acid.
That kind of elevates our suspicions that something else is going on here besides just a missing persons case.
At this point, Arturo Novoa became the main focus of the investigation. But the question remained, was he really behind the disappearance? Or was there more to the story? To find out, the police knew they had to dig deeper into the case, and they knew that the case was about to get much more twisted. The police made numerous attempts to contact Novoa, but he never responded or opened the door to his apartment. Faced with his silence, investigators turned to people who knew Shannon for information. They sought to uncover whether there were any suspicious circumstances surrounding Novoa, and if there were issues in his relationship with Shannon. And they did get some responses that would pique their interest.
Shannon and Arturo were toxic. with each other. And I know that he's put his hands on her. She was tired of it. She wanted to get away. She wanted to move on and have a better life.
11 days after Shannon was reported missing on July 3rd, 2017, the police received a call from the first suspect and Shannon's ex-fiancé, John.
John told us that Arturo and Shannon had broken up and that Arturo was upset about the breakup.
However, that wasn't the end of it. He had more to reveal.
He came forth with some information in that Arturo also had another girlfriend. We learned that Arturo was dating on and off again for many years, Katrina Layton. And we learned that she was in the picture the same time that Shannon Graves was in the picture. It was your stereotypical love triangle of individuals. So naturally, we have to look at her as a strong person of interest.
Now 3 people were in focus: John Scarata, Arturo Novoa, and his girlfriend, Katrina Layton. Now all police needed to do was to find them and ask what was going on. As the search efforts persisted, John had significant new information to disclose to the police, and this time, it was a major revelation.
John reported that a few known individuals had observed Arturo Novoa burning some of Shannon's items in a fire pit on the south side of Youngstown. In fact, another party helped him burn these items in the person of Andrew Herman.
Suddenly, the focus shifted from 3 individuals to 4 suspects in the investigation. This time, Andrew Herman also made the list. Information was scattered in all directions, the puzzle pieces lying disjointed. Assembling them was proving to be a complicated challenge, but the investigators needed one crucial piece to unravel the case entirely. However, the case was just about to take the most horrific turn. And this moment came when the police received a chilling 911 call on July 29th, 2017 at 5:05 p.m.
Call 911, what is your emergency?
Yeah, my name is Kevin. I live in Ham, Ohio.
Okay.
Me and my wife were just on a dead body in our freezer.
Dead body in the
Freezer.
freezer?
Yeah,
Alright, it's okay, sir. Is it a male? Is it a female?
I think it's a female. I need to call the police here right away.
The scene was horrifying, and Ken and Jill Eschenbaugh, the couple who discovered the remains of an unidentified woman in their freezer, were left in utter shock.
They were absolutely horrified. They just couldn't believe what they saw in that freezer.
Me and my wife just screamed, and we came up, and I went to the front steps.
When Dan Caceres, the lead prosecutor with the Ohio Attorney General's office, spoke to the couple, a chilling tale unraveled. Jill told the police that she was planning to retrieve meat for dinner from a freezer belonging to a friend of her husband's. She explained that she was looking for ground beef to make meatballs when she was startled to find a padlock on her husband's friend's freezer. Using a screwdriver, she managed to open the lock, discovering stacks of black bags and a bucket inside, emanating a horrible smell. Alarmed, she asked her husband to investigate further. Upon opening one of the bags, he was horrified to find what appeared to be a human foot. When they looked closely inside the bags, they found the dismembered body of a woman wrapped in garbage bags, with the head missing. Now the question arose, who did the freezer belong to, and why did they have it?
He said my electricity's off. Can I put my freezer in your basement? I said, yeah.
Alright, it's okay, sir.
Now the answer to the question of whose freezer it was quite unpredictable. But before revealing the person, was it actually Shannon's remains? Upon examining the body parts, the police made a significant discovery. One of the feet bore a scorpion tattoo, just like Shannon. The evidence was unmistakable. It was indeed Shannon's body in the freezer. Nevertheless, the police required a definitive confirmation. The remains were sent to the coroner's office, but due to the absence of the victim's head, the cause of death could not be determined. Despite this, the authorities were able to confirm Shannon's identity through her fingerprints. However, the police were now faced with the daunting task of unraveling the mystery of how she ended up there and when it happened.
In my deepest, darkest nightmares, did I ever fathom this occurring?
During separate interrogations, the Eschenbaus maintained consistent accounts, leading investigators to rule them out as suspects. However, a new individual came into focus, a man named Anthony Gonzalez, reportedly the person responsible for delivering the freezer to the Eschenbaus residence. Now, once again, another person emerged as a suspect in the unfolding investigation. While some aspects of the case were becoming clearer, simultaneously, the emerging details were also making it increasingly complex to pinpoint the killer. Investigators initiated a search for information regarding the new suspect, Anthony Gonzalez. And soon, Anthony was in the interview room with the police. Intriguingly, it didn't take long for the police to discover something that would change the whole course of the case.
So what is this about?
Developments since I talked to you.
And they find out that Anthony Gonzalez is actually an alias.
I know you go by Anthony, but for the purpose of this, we want to use your proper name.
Anthony Gonzalez is actually Arturo Novoa. He's Shannon Graves' boyfriend. But it's a shock to everyone.
Did you, at any point, take a freezer to a house in Campbell?
I did not.
So you didn't go to Kenny Eschenbaug's house on Devitt with a freezer, with a padlock on it and put it in his basement?
I did not.
And he is actually sitting in our interview room with the keys to the padlock. Those are things we can demonstrate right there that you're lying to us.
Now I have people that know you saying you brought a freezer to our house. When they opened it up, guess what they found?
What did they find, sir?
Why do you think you're here? The charge is abuse of a corpse.
Excuse me?
Abuse of a corpse.
Are you being serious right now?
I'm not fooling with you, man.
Additionally, investigators learned that Novoa was now in a relationship with Katrina Layton, with whom he had moved in just 2 weeks after the last confirmed sighting of Shannon. What made the situation even more unsettling was that they had moved into none other than Shannon's own apartment.
At that time, there was a lot of pressure for us to go into that apartment. When we would go there, knock on the doors, the dog would bark, so we knew the dog was in there, but nobody would ever answer the door. Katrina's car was parked there, and it just so happened that it had been parked on the street for so long and the plates were expired that we ended up towing that car. That is what triggered Katrina to come to us for our initial interview.
It was now time to have an extensive conversation with the two prime suspects, Arturo Novoa and Katrina Layton. At the same time, the officers had a few questions for another person of interest, Andrew Herman. The police managed to locate Andrew and his girlfriend, Michelle Illenfield, conducting an interview with them. However, the specific details of this interview were kept undisclosed for the time being. Rest assured, we will reveal the complete story behind this notorious crime soon enough. Now, let's jump straight into the interview with Katrina Layton.
So listen, while I got you here, one of the reasons we've been knocking on doors down there is because we're looking for Shannon.
Oh, yeah, I've heard something about that. I haven't really been following it all too closely.
We knew that she was living there. She had nothing to really add to the story about where Shannon might be.
When you moved in with Anthony, was her stuff still there?
No, I don't remember seeing anything.
Then her dog was there.
Yeah, her dog was there.
In her car. If she left her car, then how did she get in there after another day?
Yeah, well, supposedly, I mean, from what I've heard, she left with some guy.
Katrina gave us basic story that, yeah, Shannon is Arturo's ex-girlfriend. She moved away with some other guy. What we later found out was a really bitter rivalry for this man.
At this point, it was becoming clear that the case was centered around a twisted love triangle.
What I could tell you about Arturo was he dated Katrina on and off for about 8 years. That included before and after Shannon's disappearance and death.
Now, the police were determined to dig deeper into the relationships, aiming to uncover crucial clues from Katrina's statements that could provide vital insights into the case.
She was extremely jealous, and they say she hated this new, really pretty girlfriend of his.
Arturo Novoa, while he was living with Shannon Graves, repeatedly had sexual intercourse with Katrina Layton. Katrina is completely obsessed with Arturo Novoa to the extent that she would wait 5 hours in a motor vehicle in January in 15-degree weather, waiting to perform sexual acts on Arturo Novoa in a car.
Such was Katrina's obsession that made it her involvement in this horrifying act plausible. The police, considering this possibility, now sought to extract a confession from her. They began systematically presenting the evidence they had, step by step.
So she leaves her car, she leaves her dog, she leaves his phone, and
No, the phone.
Anthony's
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
not new girlfriend, but old girlfriend who's now back is now using the phone
I
that
got
Shannon
you.
was using.
Yeah.
And
So it looks weird.
Simultaneously, while Katrina was being interviewed, the police had Novoa in another room, ready to gather information from him. It was now time to confront him.
you have no idea what became of her? Where she ended up?
I do not. I have said this to everybody.
However, Novoa was not going to give in so easily. In the meantime, the police worked to gather any available information about the two suspects, and they did find some crucial details that shed light on the characters of both Katrina and Novoa.
What was interesting was we found out later that that wasn't it for Arturo.
He was using other women too that Katrina didn't know about. We've got evidence in his computer that he was involved with at least 3 other women that he's sexting pictures with.
Having learned this about Novoa, they also uncovered further information regarding Katrina.
Katrina Layton is a mom with 2 kids. She was absolutely in love with Arturo Novoa. She was crazy about him. People described her as his on-again, off-again girlfriend. That when he couldn't have somebody that he really wanted, that Katrina was his fallback.
The police were quite sure by then that Katrina hated Shannon and had something to do with the murder too. However, she was yet to break down.
Maybe she got rid of her.
Do you see how tiny I am? Really?
But sooner or later, the police believed Katrina's resolve would crumble. Their attention was primarily on her, although they from time to time gave her a break and spoke with Novoa. They understood that extracting a confession was becoming increasingly complex, although Katrina's statements were gradually becoming inconsistent and unreliable.
There's been some developments.
All right, so let me know what's going on. Why do you keep saying a body in a freezer?
Because there was a body in a freezer.
What do you mean there's a body in a freezer? And what freezer?
The freezer that you guys bought. You
Is
know,
it
I
money?
told you about 10 times that the missing girl is dead in your freezer. I'm looking for some kind of reaction to that.
Because
You don't
I'm...
look shocked at all. Yeah.
No, it's not that. I'm just trying to process everything.
Finally, when she became certain that the police were aware of the freezer being in her apartment, she admitted to buying it.
Let me ask you something. Forget all this. Did you kill her?
Hell no.
Were you there when she was killed?
No.
Okay.
What?
Well, sure looks like you did.
No, what do you mean it looks like I did?
She's in your freezer, the one you paid for. So it kind of looks like you killed her. She was banging your band.
You hated her.
And you are in possession of all her earthly goods. So it kind of looks like you killed her.
Okay, it looks like I killed her.
Her frustration was evident, and it wouldn't be long before she began mentioning things she shouldn't.
She thought she could outsmart us. She was almost as good as Arturo, except that she had a need to try to explain things, and in doing so, she let little things slip.
You guys are sitting here telling me that there's a body in this freezer that I did not bring to Kenny's house.
And that's when the interview went upside down for her.
You said anything about Kenny's house?
You just told me it was in Kenny's basement. I mean, I'm
We
assuming...
never said anything about a basement.
Well...
We never said anything
Kenny's...
about that.
Okay.
We never told you that.
Let's stay small. Girl in the freezer. What do we know about that?
I get that.
How'd you end up in your freezer?
The problem is I don't know.
Katrina was living in Shannon's house. She was driving Shannon's car, and she was looking after Shannon's dog. Yet she claimed to know nothing about Shannon's whereabouts. Such contradictions would easily raise suspicions for anyone.
The woman who's screwing your boyfriend disappears. And you basically
Slide right
into her life
with her dog.
and you don't know about it, and it's a coincidence that she ended up in your freezer.
I didn't know that she disappeared. I thought she left.
Well, she reappeared today.
I thought they broke up and she left with somebody because that's what he said.
As the interview reached a temporary halt with no confessions in sight, the police intensified their evidence collection efforts. During this whole case, Shannon's ex-fiancé John emerged as a crucial informant. As mentioned earlier in the video, he had informed police about Novoa burning items in a fire pit, and later a partially burned bracelet engraved with Shannon's name was discovered where the items had been burned. This revelation strongly suggested Novoa's attempt to destroy Shannon's belongings, possibly to eliminate evidence. To validate this claim, the police decided to approach a man named Steve, whose house served as the location for the bonfire. Investigators interviewed Steve, and he recounted that on March 1, 2017, Novoa had requested permission for a bonfire at his house, a request Steve agreed to. Novoa, along with Andrew Herman, brought Shannon's belongings to throw into the fire. Steve revealed that Novoa had told him about Shannon's supposed betrayal, which was the motivation behind burning her belongings. Police intensified their investigation and reached out to Michelle Illenfeld, who was Herman's girlfriend. She revealed to police that both Novoa and Katrina had killed Shannon, and it was Herman who had dismembered her. According to Michelle, Katrina's jealousy over Shannon's relationship with Novoa had fueled the crime. It became evident that the entire group of friends had collaborated to conceal Shannon's murder. The police didn't waste much time, and with all the evidence in hand, on September 17, 2017, Novoa was arrested and charged with 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, 24 counts of tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and 6 counts of abuse of a corpse, along with 3 counts of possession of criminal tools, 3 counts of theft of WIC benefits, 1 count of grand theft auto, and 4 counts of marijuana trafficking. However, Novoa pleaded not guilty. However, on August 8, 2018, the police decided to confront Katrina Layton once more. They reached out to her, offering a deal that guaranteed leniency, no jail time and probation if she cooperated. Remarkably, the offer proved effective, prompting Katrina to come forward with information.
Well, I had got a phone call.
from
Yeah. He was crying. I remember that. He was upset. Told him to come to the house. I didn't really know what the hell was going on. I mean, he pulled into the back of the house and she was in the trunk.
And then what happens?
He backed the car against the garage. I remember saying, well, you can't leave her in the trunk. At that point, I realized, I couldn't lift her. I was already freaking out, and that's when I called Andrew.
Katrina revealed that Andrew Herman helped Arturo dismember Shannon. It does give us something to talk to Andrew about. The only difference is now we're confronting him with what Katrina told us about him actually participating in the dismemberment. Big difference between burning someone's things and cutting them apart.
Following this, on December 18, 2018, the police arrested Andrew Herman for tampering with evidence and abuse of a corpse. However, prosecutor Dan Caceres struck a deal with Herman in exchange for testimony about the murder.
We proffered him, we met him. I told his lawyer, I said, look, if Andrew wants to be cooperative, he needs to do it. Otherwise, he's in a world of hurt.
So what happened, Arturo? He asked me to come meet him. Said he needed help. What'd you do? When I get over there, he told me to pick up a pair of garden stacks and open them up. I did. I bottled it. Who was inside? Shannon. I started freaking out on him. Saw him in face, all down.
He then stated that together they attempted to dissolve the remains using sulfuric acid. This story was consistent with the packages of sulfuric acid found in the car Novoa was initially driving. However, they lacked enough acid to dissolve more than her head, leading them to purchase a deep freezer to store the remaining remains. This account aligned with the details surrounding the freezer, fitting the pieces of the puzzle together at last. Now, all that remained was to confine these monsters behind bars. Following Herman's confession, Novoa agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for the dismissal of the aggravated murder charge, he pleaded guilty to all other charges leveled against him. On June 24, 2019, he was sentenced to a total of 48 years to life in prison at the age of 34. Subsequently, 29-year-old Andrew Herman also pleaded guilty to the charges against him, including treating a corpse with cruelty, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity, and drug trafficking. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison in 2019. On the other hand, despite the initial deal made by Katrina Layton with the prosecution, which promised her no jail time and probation, new prosecutors took over the case and proved that Katrina was still in communication with Novoa while he was in prison. As a result, her original deal was revoked and she was ultimately sentenced to 18 years in prison, starting from June 2020. Michelle Illenfeld, Herman's girlfriend, was also charged with lying to a grand jury and intimidating a witness. She received a sentence of 2.5 years in prison. Upon release, she would spend 6 months in a halfway house and serve 5 years of probation. On September 30th, 2021, Novoa filed an appeal, arguing that his guilty plea should be deemed invalid because he was not informed that a judge could rule for the sentences of each count to be served consecutively. He further contended that the counts were not merged properly, leading to more convictions between them, which was not legally permissible. So, on October 1, 2021, the Supreme Court partially sided with Novoa. They upheld his guilty plea, but determined that the trial court had made an error in sentencing, stating that some counts were not merged properly. Consequently, Novoa's sentence was vacated and sent back to the state court for resentencing. In February 2022, Novoa was resentenced to 43 years to life in prison. The case was solved and closed, providing a sense of justice to Shannon's family and friends.
But what I don't understand is what she ever could have done to have these two people do what they did to her. I only got to bury part of her body.
I knew it before I heard it. Just everything around her being missing wasn't right. So we kind of didn't know the specifics or the gruesomeness of it, but figured pretty much something like that had happened.
Yet nothing could bring back their dear Shannon. All that remained were cherished memories, a bittersweet reminder of the life she once lived. So, do you believe Shannon's murder was driven by jealousy? Or do you think there might have been other factors at play? And in your opinion, was the final verdict satisfactory?
This is the most horrific crime that I had ever seen.
The case that cannot be forgotten.
Oh, God.
On August 28, 2014, 32-year-old Timothy Ray Jones Jr. committed an unthinkable act.
Now, this next case is very unique, both in terms of its details and the legal question on mental illness.
In their family mobile home on South Lake Drive in Red Bank, New Jersey, Timothy took the lives of his 5 children, aged 1 to 8. What could have caused this father to kill his own children? Red Bank is a neighborhood in Monmouth County in the U.S. state of New Jersey. The Navesink River, the region's traditional means of transit to the ocean and other ports, runs through the community, which was incorporated in 1908. Red Bank is a commuter town for New York City and is located in the metropolitan area of New York. The borough has a population of 12,936 as of the 2020 United States Census. It was in this neighborhood that 5 young children met their end in the most horrific manner in August 2014. Timothy Jones Jr. was born in 1981 to Timothy Jones Sr. and Cindy Jones, who was 16 at the time of her pregnancy. Sadly, Cindy left the house when Jones Jr. was only 18 months old. Following this, Timothy Jones Sr. remarried. Growing up, Jones Jr. faced legal trouble in 2001 when he was arrested in Illinois on charges of possessing cocaine, forging checks, and car theft. Despite being sentenced to 7 years in prison, he was released in 2003 after serving just 2 years. After this, his life seemed to take a turn for the better. He and Amber Kaiser had met as teenagers, and they got married in 2004. They soon had 3 children. Jones continued his education, eventually getting an engineering degree and graduating from Mississippi State University. The young family later moved to Blythewood, seeking better opportunities of life. By 2014, they had 5 children who were 8-year-old Mara Gracie, 7-year-old Elias, 6-year-old Nathan, 2-year-old Gabrielle, and 1-year-old Abigail Elaine. As time went on, their marriage began to falter, and Jones' behavior changed drastically as he turned to drinking, smoking, and using synthetic marijuana. Amidst these challenges, Amber gave birth to their last child, Abigail Elaine. However, Jones had doubts about whether he was the father of the child, due to this and other problems in their marriage. Jones and Amber got divorced in 2013. After their divorce, Jones won custody of the children.
Tim and I had a lot of good times. It just becomes a point when things are volatile that you just make a choice. Where your young children aren't seeing certain things, it's affecting them at a point. And you make a choice to separate yourself from that person. And it's hard to separate yourself from that person because that's all you've known. All I knew from 19 was Tim.
It was expected that Jones would be the model father and give his all to protect his children. But who could have predicted the horror that would come later? On Thursday, August 28, 2014, Jones picked up his 3 older children from school and the 2 youngest from their babysitter. He vanished the very next day. Jones and the children were gone for several days, prompting his family to reach out to the police, but only after they were unable to get in touch with him for several days. At 9:36 a.m. the next day, the babysitter Elk tried reaching him on the phone, but received no response. Unfazed, Elk decided to text Jones at 9:38, inquiring about dropping off the youngest children at daycare. Jones responded, "Don't worry about this morning. I'll see you next week." He assured her that the children would return on Tuesday, the day following Memorial Day. Meanwhile, Jones's grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry, desperately tried to reach him from Mississippi, but he declined her calls. On August 30th, Thornsberry grew increasingly concerned and sent a series of texts to Jones throughout the day, finally questioning him at 5:13 p.m. about his unresponsiveness. At 4:54 p.m., Elk gently reminded Jones to bring diapers when dropping off Gabrielle and Abigail Elaine on September 1st. Later at 6:15 p.m., he made a call to Elk revealing his intentions to leave South Carolina with the children and start afresh. He asked Elk to clean up his mobile home and offered her whatever she wanted from the things he left behind. At 7 p.m., a call from Amber came in, but Jones didn't answer.
Tim, I'm not calling to argue or anything. I just, like, the past 2 or 3 phone calls, you've been, like, really on edge. I'm saying you're, like, coming off really frustrated or whatever. And I was just concerned about you, so please call. I'm not calling to argue or anything.
His family reached out to the police as they couldn't reach him. A nationwide alert was released looking for Jones and indicated that he was missing and traveling with his 5 children. But it wouldn't be until September 6th that they received news on his whereabouts. On September 6, 2014, a routine traffic safety stop in Smith County, Mississippi led to a shocking discovery. Tim Jones Jr. was detained at around 7 p.m. Under Sheriff Marty Patterson went to the scene around 8 p.m. He noticed that Jones showed signs of intoxication as he approached Jones's car. An Escalade emitted a foul stench. Bleach stains along the baseboard caught Patterson's attention. Running Jones' ID and license plate revealed an alarming hit from the FBI's National Crime Information Center, indicating that Jones was supposed to be traveling from Lexington with his 5 children. Patterson immediately contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department.
We did advise you of your rights, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, can you just state your name?
Tim Jones.
When questioned about his children, Jones initially denied having any, but when pressed further, he claimed to have only 3 children in South Carolina. Smith County investigators promptly reached out to Jones's father, Tim Jones Sr., who then informed Jones's grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry, and Amber, Jones's ex-wife. On September 8, 2014, investigative officers from the Lexington County Sheriff's Department and SLED arrived in Mississippi to delve into the case. 2 days later, on September 9th, Jones agreed to lead investigators to the bodies of his children. The discovery unfolded on September 10th, when the bodies of Maury Gracie, Elias, Nathan, Gabriel, and Abigail Elaine were recovered. The evidence collected from Jones's Escalade on September 11th was disturbing and haunting. Among the items logged were family photos, clothing, drawings made by the children, letters to the children penned by their mother, Amber, Bibles, Tim Jones's diploma from Mississippi State University, and his passport. Equally chilling were handwritten notes by Timothy Jones, containing lists of disturbing tasks such as melt bodies, sand bones to dust or small pieces, and burn up bodies. The list also included items needed for these horrifying acts, such as camping supplies, gas, and acid. It seemed unbelievable that this father had meticulously planned to kill and dispose of the bodies of all 5 of his children. On September 13, 2014, Jones was booked into Kirkland Correctional Facility, where he was placed in solitary confinement, away from the general population. But what had transpired on that fateful day? Why did Jones kill the children, and what prompted him to hide their bodies? Jones's confession and the police's investigation led them to the dark truth of what Jones did in the week when he disappeared with his children. The afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, set the stage for the chilling chain of events. Tim Jones picked up his 3 older children from school and retrieved his 2 youngest from the babysitter. Little did anyone know that this seemingly ordinary day would take a nightmarish turn. Before 7 p.m., a storm of anger engulfed the family's mobile home. Jones confronted his 6-year-old son, Nathan, about damaged power outlets. He beat Nathan and subjected the child to a punishing physical ordeal. Jones went further to rain down a barrage of questions on the young child. At 7:10 p.m., there was a phone call from his estranged wife, Amber. Nathan, in fear and distress, revealed that the incident had been an accident. But Jones intervened, accusing Amber of protecting their son before abruptly ending the conversation. As the evening wore on, the darkness deepened. Nathan was sent to bed, and Amber's desperate attempts to reach out went unanswered. The details here were unclear, but around 8:30 p.m., Jones either discovered Nathan's lifeless body or attempted to ruse the boy to no avail. Jones faced the grim reality that his child was gone forever. Jones, seemingly triggered by his own imagination, would later claim to the authorities that Nathan was trying to harm him through the mobile home's electricity. This paranoia pushed him to kill his children. In the early hours of the following day, Jones took his 8-year-old daughter Maury to a convenience store to buy cigarettes. Upon returning home, a wave of violence consumed him. In his confession to the authorities, Jones admitted to choking Maury and Elias, aged 8 and 7, with his bare hands. While using a belt to end the lives of Gabriel and Abigail Elaine, he then wrapped the bodies of his children in sheets and blankets from their beds, before placing them in the back seat of his vehicle. The authorities also went through Jones's search history and revealed an unusual interest in herbal incense and Atlanta. It became apparent that Jones was on the hunt for spice, a synthetic marijuana that happened to be legal in South Carolina but banned in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Determined to get his hands on the substance, he scoured the internet for smoke shops or head shops across state borders. Around this time, he also declined calls from his grandmother, who he had made prior plans with. She had left up to 23 calls and texts. Tracking data suggested Jones's presence near Moody, Alabama at 2:20 p.m. In the late afternoon, between 3 and 5 p.m., Jones continued his search for smoke shops, this time focusing on Alabama and Mississippi. As the day progressed, Jones's location hopped from Lithium Springs, Georgia at 8:04 p.m. to Washington, Georgia at 10:29 p.m. It was clear that he was covering considerable ground. By August 30th, the location of Jones's phone indicated that he was in Red Bank. By August 31st, the search queries on Jones's phone revealed his plans to start anew. He looked up camping options in South Carolina, dumps in Lexington County, and animal services. On September 1st, a store receipt found in Jones's vehicle put him in Athens, Georgia. Surprisingly, data from his phone also indicated his presence in Spartansburg and Winsboro. At 1:20 a.m. that same day, the phone's location switched to Folly Beach. The situation took a darker turn on September 2nd at 10:35 a.m. when Jones conducted a series of concerning Google searches. He looked up body in landfill, muriatic acid burn, camping near Columbia, South Carolina. What does no extradition laws mean? And facing legal problems, where should you run? The phone was traced to West Columbia between 11 a.m. and noon. Jones and Elk exchanged texts about arrangements to clean his Red Bank mobile home. At 11:54 a.m., Jones's boss, Intel, Jim McConnell, reached out to inquire about his absence from work. Additionally, there were unanswered calls from Sachs Gotha School regarding Marah, Elias, and Nathan around 1:30 p.m. The situation escalated as an unanswered call from McConnell followed at 1:53 p.m. The phone's location was further traced to Clinton, South Carolina at 3:22 p.m., Athens, Georgia at 4:19 p.m., and Lawrenceville, Georgia at 6:04 p.m. Throughout this tumultuous day, Jones ignored 2 calls from Amber at 6 p.m. and received an update call from Elk at 10:08 p.m. By September 3rd, the situation had grown concerning. Jones missed 2 calls and an unanswered text from Kevin McKinney, a co-worker at Intel, at 10:07 a.m. Additionally, his boss' call at 12:11 p.m. went unanswered too. Surveillance footage from various locations on September 3rd spotted Jones at the Augusta Road Walmart in Lexington, an Advanced Auto Store in Lake City, and a Dollar General in Orangeburg. Disturbingly, the Walmart footage showed him purchasing items like a saw blades, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles. On September 4th at 3:37 a.m., when the phone powered on again, Jones Googled missing children Tim Jones, and the phone was traced to James Island, near Charleston. Later that day, Thornsberry and Sachs Gotha's texts went unanswered, and Jones's phone was traced to Camden and then Orangeburg at 5:17 p.m. At 6:33 p.m., Jones was spotted using the Augusta Road ATM in Lexington, depositing a check for $3,518.49. This money revealed to be proceeds from Intel stock he sold weeks prior. The climax occurred on September 6th. Jones would reveal to the authorities that he placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags along a logging road between Greenville and Camden, Alabama. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29, 2014. At 9:14 a.m., the phone was located in Greenville, Alabama. Receipts and surveillance video from the same day showed Jones at the Bypass Food Mart in Camden, Alabama at 1:06 p.m. It is unusual for a father to commit such an act. This made the authorities seek to understand what pushed Tim to kill the children. Hence, an investigation was launched to verify his mental state. In the wake of his incarceration, mental health professionals closely examined Tim Jones Jr.'s psychological state. Clinical and forensic psychiatrists and psychologists were involved in the evaluation, but there were disagreement among them regarding his diagnosis. While others suggested he may have a schizoaffective disorder or a personality disorder. Additionally, they debated whether his mental state during the crime could have been influenced by the use of synthetic marijuana, or if a traumatic brain injury he suffered at age 15 played a role in underlying psychosis. These varying theories were presented to the jury during the trial. To shed light on the roots of Tim Jones Jr.'s mental state, the history of the Jones family spanning 3 generations was diagrammed and explored. The aim was to understand how a turbulent environment and a familial background mental illness could have impacted Tim Jr.'s mental health. During the trial, the jury learned about the circumstances surrounding the conception and birth of Tim Jones Sr. Roberta Thornsberry, Tim Sr.'s mother, had been assaulted by her stepfather, leading to her pregnancy at just 12 years old. Surprisingly, Tim Jr.'s mother, Cynthia, also had a family history of mental illness. Tim Jr. was born when the young couple were barely out of their teens. However, their relationship turned volatile, leading to Cynthia's attempt to take Tim Jr. away from his father. Ultimately, Tim Sr. gained custody, and as a result, Tim Jr. was raised by his grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry. Meanwhile, Tim Sr. had Cynthia confined to a mental hospital in New York after she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. These intricate family dynamics were presented as evidence to help the jury comprehend the complex web of factors that may have contributed to Tim Jones Jr.'s mental state. Thornberry's marriage had its fair share of woes. Numerous incidences of the marriage involved calls to the police for shootings, stabbings, drug possession, and physical and alcohol abuse. The environment seemed anything but stable. As the years passed, Tim Sr. went through multiple marriages, divorcing Cynthia and marrying Carolyn, with whom he had 2 more sons. By the time Tim was 9, he found himself in a broken family, and as the years went on, he witnessed his father marrying again, this time to a woman called Julie when Jones was 16. Upon his release, Jones met Amber and the two got married. Jones had a strained relationship with his father. This escalated during the Christmas holidays of 2012, leading to 18 months of silence between them. The Christmas holiday of 2012 would be the last time that Jones's father would see the children. The trial commenced on May 15, 2019. Testimonies poured in from various individuals, shedding light on the heinous crime committed by Jones. Law enforcement officials, mental health experts, correctional officers, teachers, school administrators, babysitters, and even Jones's own family members took the stand to present their accounts. From the onset, Jones's guilt was undeniable. He had confessed to the crime and the evidence against him was overwhelming. Despite this, the defense sought to establish that the man was severely mentally ill and thus not entirely responsible for his actions. However, when the jury delivered the guilty verdict, they unequivocally rejected the defense's argument. With guilt established, the focus shifted to determining the appropriate punishment for the murders. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution called on teachers and former babysitters to describe the trauma inflicted upon them by the loss of these innocent children, even though they were not biologically related. Their accounts painted a picture of the impact of Jones's actions on those left behind. The defense did not present experts to bolster their case, but they heavily relied on pleas for mercy from Jones's relatives, who advocated for a life sentence instead of death. Amidst the emotionally charged courtroom, Jones's father and grandmother took to the stand, recounting a disturbed adolescence and adulthood of Jones. Their tearful testimonies, however, firmly opposed the idea of him facing the death penalty. On the following day, Amber Kaiser, the mother of the children and Jones's wife, returned to the stand for a second time in the trial. While her first appearance was marked by tears and visible distress, this time she mustered the strength to request mercy for Jones.
I pray for Tim all the time. I pray for him often. I pray for his family often. I pray for my family. They didn't even have the opportunity to know them. I can't bring myself to want anybody to die.
Despite her own feelings of wanting to inflict harm on him, she acknowledged her children's sentiments and believed that they would not have wanted their father to die.
I hope for mercy for you. I pray for you often. And I say that without excusing what he's done.
She bravely expressed her willingness to accept whatever decision the jury would reach. Solicitor Rick Hubbard delivered the closing arguments for the state in the penalty phase of the Timothy Jones Jr. murder trial. Hubbard confronted the jury, posing a striking question. Would you reserve death for the worst of the worst? Isn't he, pointing at Tim Jones, the worst of the worst? Tim Jones, a man who brutally murdered his 5 children. As Hubbard continued, he implored the jury to consider the kind of man Jones truly was, a murderer who callously betrayed the trust of his own flesh and blood, robbing them of their precious young lives. Reflecting on Jones's tumultuous childhood, Hubbard acknowledged that amidst the chaos, his family had tried to shield him, recognizing something special in him. Jones's father, despite his own imperfections, had loved his son, and his grandmother had expressed her love for him too, though also recognizing his selfish tendencies. Hubbard highlighted how Jones had learned to manipulate his family, knowing that they would always come to him and apologize, reinforcing a sense of entitlement. Hubbard showed 2 pictures. The first was one of Jones's joyful family, and the second was the children's lifeless bodies wrapped in black garbage bags. Hubbard drove home the point that Jones was responsible for destroying this loving family. He declared, "No father does this to his children." Hubbard highlighted that Jones's choices, not his family history, led to the tragic act of leaving his children's bodies exposed. With a display of crime scene and autopsy photos, Hubbard challenged the jury to confront the reality of Jones's actions. Throughout his closing arguments, Hubbard pressed the jury to contemplate whether a man who committed such an unfathomable act deserved mercy. With the weight of the evidence and the gravity of the crime before them, the jury was left to determine the fate of Jones. Jones's attorney, Casey Secor, passionately appealed to the jury's empathy for the Jones family. He prompted them to consider the family's ongoing suffering and heartache. Secor acknowledged the gravity of Jones's actions, urging a balanced decision that respected both severe punishment and compassion. It took the jury just over 6 hours to find Jones guilty. Despite the gravity of the situation, Jones chose not to testify in his defense during either the guilt or penalty phase. Instead, the courtroom was exposed to a haunting audio confession from 2014 that left no room for doubt. After just an hour and 45 minutes of intense deliberation, the 12-member panel delivered their verdict. The death penalty was not an automatic consequence in this case. The jurors carefully considered any extenuating circumstances before reaching their unanimous decision to condemn Jones to death. All 12 jurors had to be in agreement and signed the verdict form before the judge formally delivered the death sentence. As the Jones family solemnly exited the courthouse, they remained tight-lipped, offering no comment to the press. But this would not be the end of the case. In 2021, 2 years after receiving a death sentence, Jones sought a new trial and the removal of his death penalty, claiming that the exposure to distressing autopsy photos during the original trial prejudiced jurors against him. Lawyer Robert Dudek argued that Jones, who suffers from schizophrenia, was unfairly judged. The defense contended that the inclusion of gruesome autopsy images skewed the sentencing against Jones and that prosecutors misrepresented the consequences of an insanity plea. These images, taken 9 days after the children's deaths, raised concerns about fairness. The defense also objected to excluding expert witness testimony, challenging Jones's mental health and diagnosis. Solicitor Rick Hubbard defended his decision to include the photos, facing criticism from justices for potentially manipulating the jurors' emotions. The court usually permits strong defense arguments in death penalty cases, but concerns were raised about the trial's handling. However, in March 2023, the South Carolina Supreme Court rejected Jones's appeal. The court acknowledged that 2 errors were made during the trial, but deemed them harmless errors. That didn't warrant overturning the conviction or sentence. The initial mistake was excluding Dr. Adriana Flores' testimony, meant to challenge another doctor's claims about Jones faking mental issues. The court said her input should have been allowed. The second error involved showing disturbing autopsy photos. Despite this, the court noted Jones tried to hide the crime, so the images didn't greatly affect the juror's death penalty decision.
We, the jury, in the above entitled case, have found beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of the following statutory aggravating circumstances, to wit, 2 or more persons were murdered by the defendant by act or pursuant to one scheme or course of conduct, and the murder of 5 children 11 years of age or younger. Now recommend to the court that the defendant, Timothy R. Jones, Jr., be sentenced to death.
The emotions within Jones's family must have been unimaginable. Losing all 5 children and facing the possibility of Jones's execution must be a heavy burden to bear. The prosecutors and defense attorneys, tasked with debating through the horrors of the case, are surely haunted by the disturbing images and Jones's own confession. And above all, the children's mother, who has endured indescribable pain since that fateful day on August 28, 2014. Would she be able to pick up the pieces and start again? Do you think the death sentence is a suitable punishment for Jones? Or should the jury have gone with a life sentence, given Jones's mental health plea?
They buried that boy so fast, I guess to keep from people knowing what happened to him.
They put him into that river and let him stay there all night long.
On January 2, 1944, 15-year-old Willie Howard experienced a sudden and heart-wrenching moment when 3 white men forcefully entered the house armed with guns and other weapons. It was really shocking for Lula Howard, his mother, who was alone at home and frightened about what was happening. She begged with all her heart to save her son, but the men heartlessly took Willie from their home. Even more shocking is that they took his dad, James, and brought them to the Suwannee River. In a moment that painfully revealed the depths of his father's helplessness, when Willie looked at him, who was crying and couldn't help but witness his son jumping into the river. All James could say to his son were these last words, "I cannot do anything for you now. I'm glad I have belonged to the church and prayed for you." So why did those men abduct Willie Howard? And what could Lula possibly do when the white men left the house? It all started in Suwannee County, Florida, back in 1858, when the people there, with a population of 44,485, decided to make it official and called it a Charter Day on December 21, 1858. Later, they set up Live Oak in 1863, naming it after those giant oak trees, giving travelers some cool shade. This place eventually became the county's main hub. Tucked away in the soil-rich panhandle, it was part of the Florida Black Belt, where farming was the real deal, cotton was the star, and lots of African-American farm workers were in demand. One such ordinary African-American man, Willie Howard, ended up caught in the crossfire of some seriously messed up racism. But who was Willie, and what went down with him? To figure that out, we need to dig into the nitty-gritty details of the events from the very start. When Willie James Howard, a 15-year-old boy, was born on July 13, 1928, down in Suwannee County, Florida, he was the only son of James and Lula Howard, and they loved him the most. When Willie was little, he was a super smart, cheerful, and talented guy. He was a sophomore in Florida high school, and his friends knew him as the boy with some serious singing skills. Willie was the really happy, likable, and talented kid that anyone wants as a friend. He was all about staying clean, looking sharp, and being well-dressed. The boy was defined for his politeness. He showed respect to everyone, from his pals to the older folks. Plus, he had this heart of gold that made a bunch of girls in his community crush on him. A retired public school at the African-American school that Willie attended, LaFrancis Stevens, painted a picture of Willie as an extremely respectful and polite guy, a genuinely nice young man. According to her, if he spotted you approaching, he'd step aside with courtesy. Even though LaFrancis didn't get to teach him because she was all about teaching girls back then, she couldn't help but notice his cheerful spirit and melodic talents. Willie lived with his mother and father, and even though they both had jobs, it wasn't easy for them to buy fancy clothes and shoes for him. It also made them feel sad, as Willie loved dressing up and sometimes resorting to asking other people for clothes. Despite his parents working hard, getting those snazzy outfits for Willie was a bit of a challenge. For such a bright and widely loved boy, he and his parents lived humbly and peacefully. Now, because of his habit of dressing up and being a polite and respectful man in 1943, when he was just 15, he landed a seasonal job during the Christmas holidays. It was at Van Priest 5 and Dime store in downtown Live Oak as a delivery boy, spreading holiday cheer with his deliveries. So back in the day, it was kind of a big deal for an African-American boy like Willie to score a job inside a store and do the deliveries. That spot wasn't exactly the go-to place for hiring African-American folks because of the not-so-friendly racist ideology floating around. Surprisingly, the store also had its share of Caucasian workers, and Willie was breaking the stereotype because he didn't look like the typical poor African-American person from his neighborhood or in the Deep South at the time. Now, at one point, when Willie was working at the store, he became really infatuated with a 17-year-old white girl who worked there by the name of Cynthia Goff. Willie, the quiet observer, used to watch Cynthia from afar, but never gathered the courage to talk to her. Now Willie, being his always nice self, decided to spread some holiday cheer. It was the festive season, and everyone was in a joyful mood with family and friends. So Willie took a sweet initiative and sent Christmas cards to all the female co-workers at Van Priest store, wishing them health and happiness. So after spreading the joy with Christmas cards for everyone, Willie was on cloud 9, but his happiness didn't last long. Why? Well, it turned out that one of the store employees spilled the beans that Cynthia, the girl Willie had a crush on, was actually upset about getting a card from him. When Willie heard that Cynthia was upset, he got restless because he never wanted her to feel down. In an attempt to fix things, he decided to send her a personal letter. But little did he know, this well-intentioned move would turn out to be the biggest mistake of his life. In the letter he wrote, "Dear friend, just a few lines to let you hear from me. I am well and hope you are the same. This is what I said on that Christmas card. From WJH with L. I hope you'll understand what I mean. That is what I said now. Please don't get angry with me, because you can never tell what may get in somebody. I did not put it in there myself. God did. I can't help what he does, can I? I know you don't think much about our kind of people, but we don't hate you all. We want to be your friends, but you won't let us. Please don't let anybody see this. I hope I haven't made you mad. If I did, tell me about it, and I'll forget about it. I wish this was a northern state. I guess you call me fresh. Write and tell me what you think of me, good or bad. Sincerely yours, with L, from YKW, to Cynthia Goff. I love your name, I love your voice. For a SH, you are my choice." In the letter to Cynthia, Willie spilled his feelings, sounding like he was asking her to be friends. He wrote, "I know you don't think much of our kind of people, but we don't hate you. We want to be your friend." It's like he sensed that Cynthia might not be too keen on hanging out with people like him. But Willie was still hopeful. Even if Cynthia hadn't been the friendliest to people of his race, Willie, being the hopeful romantic, didn't want to give up on trying because he really liked her. So at 15, Willie had a pretty clear picture of what he wanted in life, and he understood every word he wrote in that letter. It also gives us a peek into Willie's mindset and a glimpse of how some people, not just in his town but all over the country, were thinking during those times. But one thing Willie probably didn't know was that Cynthia's dad was Alex Goff, a respected former member of the Florida House of Representatives. Now, we're not sure if Cynthia told about the letter or if Mr. Goff found the letter himself, but on January 2, 1944, when he read Willie's letter that he gave to Cynthia, he got seriously angry. Mr. Goff wasn't exactly the hang out with any African American kind of person. Imagine his shock when he found out that an African American guy, Willie, had written a letter to his daughter. For Mr. Goff, this was like a total challenge to him and almost a crime in his eyes. So, being extremely furious, he rounded up his friends, Reginald H. Scott and Selden B. McCullers, and the three of them decided to pay Willie a visit at his house, supposedly to question him about the letter. But they weren't just armed with questions. They were also armed with guns and other weapons in tow. It seemed like their intentions might have been more than just normal questioning with Willie, but they were planning something more serious. As Mr. Goff and his friends were on their way, Willie, who was still busy with his work at the dime store, got some unsettling news. A fellow employee informed him that 3 white men were heading to his house looking for him. This news got Willie seriously scared, especially since he knew his mom, Lula, was home alone, and he knew what those men could really do. So, without wasting a moment, he rushed back home to ensure his mother's safety. As soon as Willie got home, he quickly started telling his mother about the letter and everything that happened and why these men were coming to their house. But before he could finish, at around 10 a.m., those 3 men stormed into his house and started to forcefully pull him away. When Lula saw what was happening, she did everything she could to protect Willie, pleading with them to let him go. She cried, begged, and tried to reason, but Mr. Goff seemed totally consumed by anger and was unwilling to listen to anything. That's when things took a terrifying turn when Mr. Goff pulled out a pistol and aimed it at Lula's head. He demanded that she hand over Willie to them. Being terrified and caught in an impossible situation, Lula reluctantly let the men take Willie away. As the cars drove off with her son, Lula ran after them, crying and screaming for them to let him go. But they didn't stop. Now, after seeing no other way desperately, she rushed to the lumberyard where her husband James worked, in hopes to share the dreadful news of Willie's abduction. However, fate had different plans. Before she could even reach there, Mr. Goff and his two companions showed up with guns in hand and ordered James to get into the car with them. Now, by the time Lula reached the lumberyard, it was too late. Those men had already taken her son and husband. But there she met the lumberyard owner's wife, who spilled the details about everything that went down and how those three men took James with them. From there, the car drove out of town towards the Suwannee River, reaching a bluff in Sulphur Springs. Once they reached the high bank of the river, Mr. Goff had Willie and his father step out of the car. That's when he explained to James about everything Willie was accused of doing. James, even after knowing that his son was innocent and didn't do anything wrong, he felt utterly helpless in that heartbreaking moment. The three men tied up Willie's hands and feet, and he just stood there, watching helplessly. Then Mr. Goff took on the roles of both judge and jury and asked Willie James if he grasped the so-called penalty for his crime, which, mind you, was just sending a letter to his daughter Cynthia. According to Mr. Goff, Willie committed a crime, and he wanted to make an example out of him so that no one else would even think of doing the same in the future. Being terrified, Willie tearfully replied, "Yes, sir," as he faced this bizarre trial, weeping all the while. Mr. Goff turned to James and asked if he had any words for his son. Powerless to change the course of his son's fate, James just shared some comforting words in what he realized were Willie's last moments. "Willie, I cannot do anything for you now. I'm glad I have belonged to the church and prayed for you." Both father and son had tears streaming down their faces. In a poignant final request, Willie asked his father to take his wallet. In a small yet significant exchange in the midst of this heart-wrenching ordeal. Then, without wasting a moment, Mr. Goff took out a gun and aimed it at Willie's head. He gave him a chilling ultimatum. Either jump into the water or face what was in the gun. Remember, Willie's hands and feet were still bound. He was gagged and forced into an impossible decision, where he had no other choice but to jump into the water and subjected himself to a horrific drowning death. Meanwhile, James, who was helpless, watched his son from a distance, ending his own life and meeting such a tragic end in front of his eyes. Even after doing this, the men seemed like they weren't satisfied. They took James back in the car and left him at the lumberyard, making sure he couldn't try to save his drowning son. Now, when James finished his work shift and returned home with a heavy heart, he had to deliver the devastating news to his wife, Lula. James sadly informed her that Willie wouldn't be coming home again. Even though Lula was somewhat prepared for the news, since she knew what the men had intended, but hearing it from James, she couldn't hold back her tears. It was a heartbreaking moment for the family. Now, if you think that's the end of the story, then hold on tight, because the story doesn't stop there. The white men went back to the Suwannee River, retrieved Willie's body, and buried him. But they weren't done. They crafted their own version of events, and here's where it gets really interesting. Mr. Goff, being a representative with some serious power, headed straight to Tom Henry, the sheriff of Suwannee County in 1944. There, the three men gave Sheriff Tom a written statement in which they shared their side of the story. According to them, they picked up Willie James from his house and brought him to his father James with the intention of having his father whip him over the letter. Further, they claimed that upon reaching the river, Willie actually resisted his father's attempt to discipline him. According to them, in his struggle to break free, Willie accidentally fell into the river and drowned himself. They insisted that they tried hard to rescue him, while his father supposedly stood by, doing nothing. It was a strategic move on their part, telling their version of events in advance because they knew that the sheriff would believe them more than the Howard family. It was done to secure their innocence and avoid being suspected of Willie's death. But the question was, even if Sheriff Tom decided to buy into the story that Willie drowned himself, why didn't he slap them with a kidnapping charge, even though they themselves had straight up admitted that they grabbed the boy from his house? Even back in Suwannee County in 1944, it was against the law to forcibly take a child from his mother. Yet, the white community seemed to swallow the story hook, line, and sinker. In their eyes, the African American boy's demise was just a tragic accident. In reality, Willie was kidnapped, murdered, and buried within a mere 24 hours without leaving a proper grave marker. Sadly, Willie's case wasn't the only one, and he wasn't the only African American boy to endure such cruelty. In August 1955, another tragic incident unfolded in Florida with Emmett Till, a 14-year-old African American boy who faced lynching at the hands of 3 white men, all because he supposedly got physical with a white woman. Racism has been around for a long time, and unfortunately, it still exists in many parts of the world. Many cases of lynching have remained hidden, which never came to light, and the stories often go unheard. Willie's case would have also been one of those cases, and no one would have ever known until one day fate took a turn. Elbert C. Robinson, an African-American attorney from Live Oak, then in 1944 living in Washington, D.C., came home for the holidays. There he heard from the owner of the lumberyard about an African-American child being lynched, and he was so disturbed by this injustice that just 2 days after Willie's murder, on January 4, 1944, Robinson wrote a letter to the NAACP in Washington, D.C. Little did he know that this letter would set in motion the involvement of Thurgood Marshall, who in 1944 became the first African-American person to serve on the United States Supreme Court, ensuring Willie's story wouldn't be buried in silence. The letter dated January 4, 1944 stated, "While visiting in Florida during the Christmas holidays, one of the most gruesome cases imaginable was called to my attention. The people who relayed the facts in this case to me asked that I withhold their names, but implored me to get the facts in this case through to the NAACP as soon as possible. It appears that the conditions there are so tense that the colored people, high and low, are so frightened that they are afraid to have their names identified with cases of this type." After reading that impactful letter, Attorney Robinson not only shared the names of those he'd spoken to, Willie's father, James Howard, the African-American undertaker, Ansel Brown, Reverend R.M. Lane of Live Oak, and Mr. McPherson, the principal of Willie's school, but he also made a request to not publicize these names. Attorney Robinson's intervention actually sparked action into Willie's case. The NAACP sent letters to Florida Governor Holland urging an investigation into Willie's killing. This move marked the first step toward justice for Willie. The governor also appointed Special Investigator David Lanier from Florida Law Enforcement Agency and instructed him to provide a discreet report on the matter. The wheels of justice started turning, albeit quietly. Investigator Lanier wasted no time and went straight to the heart of the matter, interviewing those involved in Willie's case. His interviews included Sheriff Tom, the 3 men implicated in Willie's death, James and Luna Howard. However, Luna, in her account to the special investigator, painted a vivid picture. On January 2, 1944, James had left for work at Bond Howell Lumber Company, where Mr. R.L. Howard was his boss. Later that morning, an automobile carrying 3 white men pulled up to my house. From that, 2 white men stood at the gate, in which one was named Mr. McCullough, and the identity of the other man remained unknown to me. The third man was Mr. Phil Goff. Suddenly, Willie walked into the house, and Mr. Goff seized him, insisting him to come along. I frantically tried to pull Willie away, begging and asking what he had done. In the midst of this, Mr. Goff produced a revolver, pointing it at me. He forcibly dragged Willie to the car, joined by the other white men, and sped off towards Live Oak. I chased after the car, but it quickly got away from me. Once the interviews were done, Investigator Lanier was convinced that the 3 men were responsible for Willie's tragic end. In his report to the governor, David Lanier straightforwardly stated that the men were guilty of murder if they were guilty of anything. In response, on February 14, 1944, Governor Holland wrote to Thurgood Marshall, attaching a copy of Lanier's report. However, the governor also cautioned Marshall about the challenges ahead, emphasizing the difficulties when the testimony of 3 white men and the girl would likely stand against the account of 1 African-American man. Despite having all the information, fighting for this case remained an uphill battle. The pursuit of justice for Willie took an unexpected turn at the Sewanee Courthouse on May 4, 1944. The state's attorney brought the Howard killing before a grand jury, but things didn't unfold as anticipated. In a surprising twist, the only witness summoned was James Howard, who had relocated to Orlando by then. The grand jury just had two questions for him. How old was the boy? Did he personally deliver the letter to Cynthia Goff? Strangely, there were no inquiries about what transpired at the river. Lula Howard and other potential corroborating witnesses were not called. Even the special investigator Lanier was left out. After responding to the two questions, James Howard was dismissed from the grand jury proceedings and was left in the dark about any further developments. But why weren't there any questions about those white men? Why weren't there any questions about how Willie died? Why wasn't it important for the state's attorney? In a final push for justice, Harry T. Moore, the head of the state NAACP and a childhood classmate of Lula Howard, made a valiant effort.
Moore conducted his own investigation. He gathered affidavits from the Howard family. He organized an NAACP chapter in Live Oak, using the Howard lynching as his rallying cry.
Hailing from the same settlement outside Live Oak called Houston, Moore felt a personal connection to Willie's case. He teamed up with Marshall, and they both aimed to involve the federal authorities. But, despite the compelling arguments presented by Marshall and Moore, the state chose to remain silent, which only added another chapter to the sadly familiar narrative of justice eluding those who need it most.
He was going to the site of the lynching. He was finding the surviving family members, interviewing them, taking sworn affidavits, writing letters to the governor accusing white sheriffs of being implicated in the murder or of covering up the murder, and he just kept pushing it.
Following the lynching, Willie James' parents promptly relocated to Orlando, where James Howard passed away a few years later, and Lula Howard lived until 2004. Mamie, Lula's sister, shared in a 2006 interview in Orlando that Lula's heart remained broken throughout her life. Willie was her only child and had left an indelible mark on her, a wound that time couldn't fully heal. Even after decades, some Caucasian individuals in Live Oak continue to cling to the drowning myth. In an interview on October 19, 2006, Susan K. Lamb, the editor of the Suwannee Democrat, the town's newspaper, adamantly stated, "It was not a lynching, it was a drowning." According to her, the boy was supposedly running away and met his demise in the river. When questioned about the practicality of running with bound hands and feet, her response was simply, "Isn't that interesting?" Willie James Howard was laid to rest in Live Oak's East Side Cemetery, resting in anonymity for over 60 years with no marker on his grave. It was finally in 2005 when Douglas Udell, a Suwannee County commissioner and mortician, took the initiative. Having acquired the funeral home and records from Ansel Brown, who'd handled Willie James' burial, Commissioner Udell funded and arranged for a long-overdue grave marker. Additionally, he organized a church service to honor Willie James, a poignant tribute that had been absent at the time of his tragic death. Now, Douglas Udell stands as a testament to the evolving landscape of African American political influence in Suwannee County, once among Florida's most conservative regions. Despite a district with a majority of white voters, Udell was elected chairman of the Suwannee County Commission in November 2007, showcasing a shift in the county's political dynamics. Also in 2006, Suwannee County Sheriff Tony Cameron demonstrated a rare commitment by attending the memorial service for Willie James, one of the few Caucasian people to do so. His presence spoke volumes, saying, "I thought I should be there." Sheriff Cameron's assistance extended to aiding Douglas Udell's research efforts. He reached out to Cynthia Goff's best friend from his office, revealing that Cynthia, although no longer residing in Live Oak, occasionally visits there. The friend shared that Cynthia was deeply distressed by Willie James' tragic fate, expressing, "She did not intend for that to happen. I think it stayed with her all of her life." Cynthia never married and spent her life working in downtown stores, including the Van Priest dime store. This incident had a profound impact on everyone involved and disrupted their lives permanently. During that period, racism deeply influenced society and created a stark division between African American and Caucasian people. Caucasians were often considered superior, while African Americans faced unjust perceptions of inferiority. Over time, society has evolved, and today, people from all backgrounds are treated with equal respect and offered opportunities regardless of their race. Presently, individuals of all races, including white people, embrace diversity and easily interact with one another. Yet some lingering perceptions suggest that Willie may have believed he could navigate a racially biased world, relying on charm, style, singing talent, and an unconventional job choice. The complexities of his motivations during those times continue to fuel discussions. It's hard to definitively say why Willie wrote the letter to Cynthia. Some might argue he wrote it out of pride in himself, believing he could break social barriers. On the other hand, it's also possible that Willie genuinely had feelings for Cynthia, hoping to build a connection despite the racial challenges of the time. The complexities of human emotions make it challenging to pinpoint a single motivation behind Willie's actions. The situation raised many questions about the role of fear, power dynamics, and societal pressures during those challenging times. The truth remains buried in traditional thinking, lingering racism, and the feeling of a justice that was never fully realized. So, we leave you with this. What are your thoughts on whether James truly chose not to save Willie, or if external factors hindered his ability to intervene? Additionally, considering the gravity of the situation, what punishment, in your opinion, would be fitting for the three men involved in taking Willie's life?
On November 10, 2015, the life of 30-year-old Pastor Davy Blackburn was forever altered when he returned home from the gym to his residence on Sunnyfield Court in Indianapolis, Indiana, only to be confronted with his worst nightmare.
A young pastor comes home to find his pregnant wife shot in their home. Her attacker still on the loose. Now police are trying to piece together how and why this apparent robbery turned deadly.
Inside the house, his 28-year-old wife, Amanda Blackburn, who was 12 weeks pregnant, lay on the living room floor, partially nude, grievously injured, and covered in blood. Rushing upstairs, he discovered their 15-month-old son, Weston, unharmed in his crib. Davy immediately dialed 911, as Amanda, though still alive, was in critical condition. Tragically, neither Amanda nor her unborn child would survive this horrific ordeal. The following day, on November 11, 2015, Amanda was removed from life support and passed away. Who could have perpetrated such a heinous act against a pregnant woman? Was it a random robbery gone wrong? Or were there much darker motives at play? Get ready to delve into the mysteries of this case, one that, while officially solved, continues to pique the curiosity of countless individuals who suspect that there's more than meets the eye. Amanda Grace Byers was welcomed into the world on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan, by her loving parents Phil and Robin Byers. She was blessed with an older brother, James, and an elder sister named Amber. As the youngest in the family, Amanda was enveloped in love, and in return, never hesitated to bestow kindness upon others. She started school in Indianapolis, Indiana, before moving to Elkhart, Indiana in 1995 with her family. Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, and she furthered her education at Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida, where she earned an associate's degree in 2008. Described as both beautiful and graceful, Amanda exuded confidence and grace in all that she did. Her spirit of never giving up was a testament to her character, and throughout her life, she steadfastly held on to her faith in God. Her family's strong Christian values, particularly her father's role as a pastor at the First Baptist Church in Elkhart, deeply influenced her. With a radiant smile that was her trademark, Amanda had a passion for uniting people in their faith in Jesus. It was only fitting that she would choose a life partner who shared her strong Christian values, and so she found Davy Blackburn. Davy, born on November 2, 1985 in Tuscaloosa, embarked on his educational journey at Tuscaloosa County High School, before transferring to Shades Valley High School. During his father's tenure as a pastor at Brookview Wesleyan Church in Birmingham, Alabama, he pursued higher education at Southern Wesleyan University in South Carolina, where he graduated with a degree in religion and media communication. Amanda and Davy met on a blind date set up by Amanda's sister, Amber, who was dating Davy's best friend, Gavin.
We were actually set up on a blind date. My sister's boyfriend at the time went to college with Davy, met the freshman year, and he was like, dude, I didn't realize this, but I should totally hook you up with my girlfriend's sister.
It was October 1st, 2005, and they all attended a concert featuring the Christian band Hawk Nelson. Although they didn't expect the date to go well, it turned out to be the beginning of something special. Their relationship moved quickly, but it faced the challenge of being long distance. They were both attending different colleges, and they could only see each other during breaks, typically for periods of about 2 weeks at a time. To make it work, they even sought counseling to improve their communication. Despite the distance, they knew they had found the one in each other and made the most of the time they could spend together. Davy saw Amanda as the missing piece that completed his life in a unique and irreplaceable way. Aside from Davy, Amanda shared an incredibly close bond with her sister, Amber, to the extent that they confided in each other about everything. They experienced significant life moments side by side, whether it was running marathons together or walking down the aisle together with their father. On August 1st, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn tied the knot shortly after Amanda's graduation. Following their nuptials, the couple initially established their home in Greenville, South Carolina, where Davy undertook the role of an assistant pastor at New Spring Church. However, the tug of their previous home grew stronger, prompting their return to Indianapolis by 2012. Together, this young couple embarked on a journey of creating Resonant Church, an institution designed to offer worship and guidance to young individuals, with its message finely tuned to resonate with the hearts of the youth. Amanda and Davy were both deeply committed to their church, with Davy serving as the pastor. Collectively, they invested a significant portion of their time in counseling and guiding the church community. They engaged in extensive discussions on topics such as relationship advice, marital challenges, and intimate relationships, drawing from their own experiences and faith to offer support and guidance to those in need. Alongside the church, their own family began to flourish as on July 28, 2014, the couple welcomed their son, Weston, into the world. As expected, Amanda proved to be an exceptional mother, dedicating all her time and love to her precious child. Therefore, the decision to expand their family further was an easy one. Amanda became pregnant for the second time in 2015. Although they never underwent an official test to determine the gender, both Davy and Amanda were convinced that their second child would be a girl. They even selected the name Everett for the baby, who was expected to arrive on May 18, 2016. Tragically, Amanda would never live to see that day. On the fateful morning of November 10, 2015, just shortly after 8:30 a.m., the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department received a distressing 911 call from Davy Blackburn. He had found his wife Amanda, who was 12 weeks pregnant, collapsed inside their residence. In response to the urgent call, Indianapolis police officers swiftly arrived at the Blackburn residence, situated at the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court, on the northwest side of Indianapolis. They initiated an inquiry seeking to understand the sequence of events leading up to this tragic discovery. According to his account, the day began like any other. He awoke at approximately 4:30 a.m., dedicated time to reading his Bible, and subsequently departed for LA Fitness Gym around 6 a.m. He explained that he had left the door unlocked due to the fact, at the time, they possessed only one house key, which was attached to his wife's keyring. Davy explained that he had spent approximately an hour at the gym and then concluded his workout session, starting his drive back home. During his drive, he was engrossed in a phone conversation with a friend, which continued even after he arrived home around 7:30 a.m. To avoid disturbing Amanda and their 15-month-old son, Weston, Davy opted to stay in his car in the driveway to finish up his conversation. His phone conversation came to an end around 8:20 a.m., and he made his way into the house and stumbled upon a scene straight out of a horror movie. On the living room floor, Amanda was lying face down, unconscious and covered in blood. Davey said he was initially uncertain about what had transpired, believing that Amanda might have fainted due to a dizzy spell and that a decorative ladder in the living room had accidentally fallen on her.
I can't imagine any reason why. I mean, we're confused. We don't understand why. We're angry. We're not really sure what to do.
However, as he looked closer, he noticed that her pants were removed. Her underwear was neatly folded under her left thigh, and her shirt pulled over her head, as if somebody was trying to take it off. Although she was lying in a pool of blood, she was still breathing. Deeply concerned about the safety of their 15-month-old son, Davey ran upstairs to reach Weston's room, where he found the child safe and unharmed in his crib. Overwhelmed by a flood of emotions, he promptly dialed 911 to request urgent assistance.
911, for case emergency.
My wife, I just walked in the door coming back from the gym. She's collapsed. She's breathing right now, but there's blood all over the place coming out of her nose, it looks like. She's still breathing. I didn't want to turn her over.
While they entered the house, officers discovered Amanda in the exact condition Davey had described. She was clinging to life, and paramedics engaged in a relentless battle to resuscitate her. When that failed, they rushed her to the hospital in hopes of saving both her and her unborn child, racing against time. With this critical situation unfolding, the investigation swung into motion. Even though suspicion had never been directed at Davey, it was standard procedure to commence the investigation with a close examination of the spouse. So the investigators visited the LA Fitness gym where Davey had been that morning. Following a thorough confirmation of his alibi, Davey was quickly cleared from any involvement in the murder. With this crucial step completed, the investigative efforts could be concentrated on the crime scene itself. The officers instantly observed a series of irregularities within the scene. Amanda's wallet and credit cards were strewn across the floor. A pack of Swisher Sweet cigars were conspicuously placed on the kitchen counter, and a decorative lamp had been knocked over in close proximity to where Amanda lay, all of which pointed to a violent struggle. The presence of the cigars was particularly perplexing as neither Amanda nor Davey were smokers. The scene bore the haunting marks of the violence and confrontation that had transpired just hours earlier. While investigators were diligently searching for clues, Amanda was fighting for her life. Tragically, she wouldn't survive. On November 11, 2015, she was taken off life support and passed away, along with her unborn baby, leaving her family in mourning over her tragic murder and desperate for justice. The autopsy report unveiled the cruel and horrific extent of the violence inflicted upon Amanda. Contrary to Davey's initial impression that she might have been struck in the head, the report indicated that she had sustained 3 gunshot wounds, one to her arm, another to her upper back, and the fatal one to the back of her head. In addition to the gunshot wounds, there were telling signs of trauma, including scratches on her left cheek, a split lip, and the loss of a lower tooth, painting a distressing picture of the physical ordeal she had endured. Throughout the crime scene, extensive DNA swabs were conducted, spanning the entirety of the house. This methodical investigation led to the discovery of a variety of items and pieces of evidence, such as a roll of duct tape, earphones, a bullet, and scattered change on the floor. Collectively, these findings painted a vivid picture of the chaos of the crime scene. Additionally, the caliber of the bullets was identified as either a .38 or 9mm, providing a crucial clue regarding the potential weapon utilized in this tragic incident. Another vital clue emerged within the confines of the home. Amanda's cell phone was located in her bedroom, and upon examination, investigators noticed that she had received an email alert at 7:53 a.m. on the morning of the home invasion, notifying her about a suspicious transaction involving her Chase debit card. Subsequent investigation revealed that the debit card had been stolen. This digital breadcrumb initiated a chain of investigative steps that would eventually lead the detectives to a series of ATM transactions. These transactions, in turn, led to the discovery of surveillance footage capturing a suspect in the act of attempting to withdraw money. The individual in the footage had wrapped a pink shirt around his face in an effort to conceal his identity, marking a significant breakthrough in the investigation. He was also wearing a dark-colored vest. This evidence unmistakably indicated that the home invasion had, in fact, been a robbery that tragically escalated into a deadly confrontation. Around the same time, a series of burglaries in the same vicinity began to reveal a pattern too conspicuous to overlook. On that very morning of November 10th at 5:23 a.m., Jacola Searsbrook, a resident of the same neighborhood, placed a call to 911 to report a break-in. She recounted to the police that she had woken at 4:30 a.m., only to discover her cell phone missing from her bedroom. As she ventured further, she discovered that her sliding glass door was ajar, her potted plants had been disturbed, and her Apple MacBook, purse, headphones, car keys, and even a pack of Swisher cigars were all gone. In an even more disturbing turn of events, her 2007 Chrysler Sebring was absent from the parking lot. The investigation also unveiled that the apartment surveillance cameras capturing still images of the three individuals entering the premises. Although their identities remained undisclosed, it was determined that the burglars had gained access by cutting the porch screen and subsequently opening the sliding door. However, they had disabled the camera during the actual burglary, further obscuring their identification. The second 911 call that morning was placed at 8:17 a.m. by Allison Becker, a neighbor who resided on the same street as Davy and Amanda. She reported that she had not been at home that morning and returned to discover that her residence had fallen victim to a burglary. The thieves made off with 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, an AT&T remote, a bag of oranges, and a few bed sheets, likely used to wrap the stolen items for transport. As the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that this apartment was also equipped with a security camera, which, much like the others, had been disabled. This time at 5:36 a.m. Detectives pieced together that the burglars had entered the apartment by cutting through the porch screen and somehow managed to unlock the deadbolt, securing the sliding glass door. To add to the unnerving atmosphere, it appeared that the robbers had settled in, consuming wine and beer before departing, leaving the emptied bottles behind. These unsettling actions hinted at a disturbing level of confidence the burglars had. Detectives at this point believed that the same group might have been responsible for the string of burglaries in the area and could have been responsible for the death of Amanda and her unborn baby. As the police conducted inquiries throughout the neighborhood to seek information on any suspicious activities from the day of the robberies, they indeed found several individuals who had witnessed unusual occurrences. One neighbor recounted that just before 7 a.m. on that ill-fated morning, she had seen a man dressed entirely in black, with a hood concealing his head, walking in front of her house. Another witness recalled seeing the same man who was engaged in a loud conversation on his phone, with a t-shirt pulled over his face. By 7:10 a.m., yet another neighbor reported observing a Chrysler Sebring pull up alongside the man. The man was seen entering the car, which then quickly departed. This information expanded the investigative net, eventually revealing another crucial clue. Surveillance footage from one resident's camera captured both the car and the man. Another witness came forward to report that on the morning of November 10th, 2015, she heard 2 loud noises accompanied by a woman's screams, a chilling detail that led the police to theorize that this might have been the moment when Amanda was attacked. The stolen Chrysler Sebring emerged as a pivotal link, unmistakably connecting the dots between the series of burglaries. Remarkably, it was discovered abandoned by the side of the road, not far from the Blackburn residence, on November 11th, 2015, the very day Amanda tragically passed away. A comprehensive search of the vehicle led to the discovery of some of the stolen items, alongside an ATM receipt, indicating a denied transaction attempt of $500. Conducted using Amanda's debit card at 6:36 a.m. on November 10th. This evidence was supported by the ATM surveillance footage, capturing a man with his face concealed in a pink sweater, as it was previously mentioned. However, this time another significant piece of evidence emerged. The same man was seen in surveillance footage of a nearby ATM at 6:54 a.m., successfully completing a transaction for $400. This evidence strongly suggested that Amanda had been attacked almost immediately after Davy left the house that morning. Nonetheless, DNA samples were collected from the car and subsequently forwarded for testing, with the results screened through CODES to identify any potential matches. By November 17, 2015, investigators received a breakthrough, a DNA match that finally put a suspect on their radar. The DNA discovered in the car was linked to a 21-year-old man named Jalen Watson. Intriguingly, Jalen had only been released from prison on August 6, 2015, following a previous conviction for burglary, and he was currently on parole. Delving into Jalen's Facebook account, detectives unearthed a connection between him and a 24-year-old man named Deano Gordon, who also happened to be on parole for burglary. The plot continued to thicken as the investigators tracked the location data associated with the phone numbers of both these men on the morning of November 10th. The unfolding sequence of events began to reveal itself through the location pings from their phones. At 4:40 a.m., roughly coinciding with the timing of the first robbery, their phones pinged off the tower nearest to the initial home. This pattern recurred with the second robbery and chillingly corresponded to the estimated time of Amanda's murder at 6:25 a.m. The digital footprints left behind continued to be traced, leading investigators to the towers closest to the ATMs, where Amanda's stolen debit card was used at 6:39 a.m. and then once more at 6:54 a.m. Gradually, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together, painting a clearer picture of the crime spree. Deeper scrutiny of Jalen's communications ultimately led to the discovery of the third and youngest member of the burglar trio, an 18-year-old named Larry Taylor Jr. A review of the communication records unveiled conversations that implicated Larry in the crime that morning. Born in 1997, relatively little was known about Larry, who would soon take on a central role in Amanda Blackburn's murder. Similar to his associates, Larry also had a criminal history that included misdemeanor charges, one of which involved an incident of public nudity and indecency, where he had exposed himself to a woman in a parking lot. Investigators proceeded to obtain the phone number Jalen had provided for his parole board, which turned out to belong to his older sister, Giornita. When the police spoke with her, she disclosed that on that night prior to the tragic events, Larry, Jalen, and Deano had been hanging out at her apartment. They departed the apartment at 3:30 a.m. on November 10th. Additionally, she shared with the authorities that one of the three men had been wearing a dark vest that morning, corroborating a description provided by a witness. Giornita also handed over a 9mm pistol that had been brought to the apartment, likely by either Jalen or Deano, and left under her bed. On that fateful morning, the trio's criminal activities began with burglaries, which evolved into something far more sinister in no time. According to a confidential informant whose identity remained undisclosed, Larry, Jalen, and Deano had ventured out in the early morning hours with the intention of breaking into a residence to obtain some money. Larry had also brought along a .38 revolver with him. They arrived at Jacola Searsbrook apartment on the east side of Indianapolis on foot. Larry was the first to gain entry into Jacola's apartment and then let the other two inside through the front door. Following the theft of numerous items, the trio fled the scene, using Jacola's car for transportation. They initially drove to the residence of Jalen's child's mother, located near 38th and Kessler Boulevard, with the intention of him being dropped off there. However, as he was unable to establish contact with the woman, they departed and headed to a nearby neighborhood to engage in further burglaries. While in the neighborhood, the men noticed a house with a back porch that appeared vulnerable to intrusion. This particular residence was situated on Sunnyfield Court and belonged to Allison Becker, who was not present at home during that time. The men parked the car and gained entry to the home through the patio door. After spending some time inside consuming alcohol and stealing numerous items, they eventually exited the apartment to load the pilfered possessions into their car. It was at this point that Larry informed the others that he had observed someone departing from a neighboring home, leading them to believe that this residence might be unoccupied. Once they had completed loading their vehicle, the three of them drove to that particular home. It was the marital home of Amanda and Davy. Upon entering the residence through the unlocked front door, the men immediately spotted a purse on the kitchen counter, taking the money it contained and dividing it among themselves. Additionally, they confiscated some credit cards found there. As they continued to search the rest of the home, they unexpectedly encountered Amanda. The men formulated a plan to use Amanda's credit cards at an ATM to obtain money. Their initial attempt to persuade Amanda to accompany them was met with her refusal, and when they tried to physically compel her to leave, she resisted and dropped to the ground. So it was decided that Jalen and Deanna would go to the ATM, while Larry would remain behind with Amanda and her son, who was still asleep in his room upstairs. The informant further disclosed that Jalen and Deanna proceeded to drive to a nearby Chase ATM, but they encountered difficulties in using the card with that particular machine. Jalen and Deanna then called Larry, who apparently provided them with the correct ATM passcode. From there, they drove to a different Chase Bank ATM located in the vicinity of 86th Street and Ditch Road. After parking there, Jalen exited the vehicle and approached the ATM. Given the cold weather, he wrapped the pink sweater that had been acquired from Allison's residence around his face. On this occasion, he successfully withdrew $400 from the ATM, which was then divided between Jalen and Deanna. Meanwhile, Larry placed several calls to Deanna, expressing his frustration and demanding that they return to the Blackburn's residence to pick him up. Eventually, they complied with his request, but by the time they got there, Larry had already left the Blackburn's house and was walking down the street with a backpack he had taken from the home. Larry was reportedly in a state of panic and urged the others to simply leave him behind. He instructed Jalen to drive to an apartment complex situated at 56 in Georgetown, where they left him at the residence of an individual referred to as Shy. While en route, Larry disclosed to them that he had attempted to sleep with Amanda, but she had rejected his advances. As a result, he had shot her once, and as she fell down, he shot her again in the back of her head. Eventually, the men abandoned Jacola's car near 38th Street and Brookwood Drive in Indianapolis and went their separate ways. The diligent efforts of the Indianapolis police, combined with the mounting evidence, culminated in the arrest of all three individuals responsible for Amanda's tragic death, just 2 weeks after the incident.
There's been a major development in a high-profile murder case. A teenager is now under arrest this morning in the murder of an Indiana pastor's pregnant wife.
Overnight, police in Indianapolis confirming that after a nearly 2-week-long investigation, they have made an arrest in the murder of 28-year-old Amanda Blackburn. 18-year-old Larry Taylor taken into custody Sunday on a preliminary charge of murder.
Larry faced a total of 13 charges, including murder, burglary, criminal confinement while armed with a deadly weapon, and robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. His accomplice, Jalen, was charged with 10 offenses, which included murder, burglary, robbing resulting in serious bodily injury, and auto theft. Initially, the third accomplice, Deanna, was charged with burglary and theft, but as the case developed, he too faced the charges of murder. The dark saga of Larry Taylor extended even further, with revelations about his potential involvement in other heinous crimes coming to light. On November 4, 2015, just a week before Amanda's murder, the lifeless body of Rolando Gonzalez Hernandez, a 27-year-old Mexican man, was discovered next to his car at his apartment complex, having been fatally shot in the head. Witnesses shared with authorities that Larry had openly boasted about a robbery and shooting that had occurred at the same apartment complex, using derogatory language to describe the victim based on his ethnicity. According to Larry, the robbery had produced a measly sum of $10 from Rolando's wallet. Additionally, it was alleged that Larry had confided in other witnesses about breaking into a woman's home and subjecting her to a terrifying assault at gunpoint. Despite these allegations, Larry wasn't charged with these crimes due to insufficient evidence. However, there was no escaping the consequences of his actions in the case of Amanda. Yet the legal procedure to bring Larry and his accomplices to justice was not only complex, but long drawn out. Spanning 2 to 3 years of legal maneuvering, plea negotiations, and the anticipation of a trial. Ultimately, Deano and Jalen reached agreements that required them to testify against Larry during his bench trial. In exchange for their cooperation, the murder charges against them were dismissed. Jalen was sentenced to 29 years in prison, while Deano received a 30-year sentence. The trial of Larry Taylor Jr. didn't start until December 2021. However, when it finally did, an unusual situation arose. His defense attorney successfully persuaded the court to withhold information about Amanda's unborn child from the jury, even though Larry had originally been charged with the baby's death as well. Nevertheless, the jurors somehow discovered Amanda's pregnancy during the trial, prompting the judge to declare a mistrial due to concerns that it might evoke sympathy from the jury. A second trial was scheduled for June 2022. However, another obstacle arose. Some jurors had become aware of the previous mistrial and were discussing it among themselves. As a result, the judge declared another mistrial, further prolonging the legal proceedings. The third attempt to try Larry for Amanda's murder was scheduled for October 2022. In this trial, the prosecution relied on the testimonies of Deano and Jalen, cell phone data, and other witness accounts. Thankfully, the trial proceeded without any more unexpected revelations, and by September 2022, a verdict was reached. Ultimately, Larry Taylor was convicted on various charges, which encompassed murder, burglary, theft, criminal confinement, auto theft, and unlawful possession of a handgun. The court sentenced Larry to 86 years of imprisonment, ultimately concluding a chaotic legal odyssey linked to the tragic loss of Amanda Grace Blackburn and her unborn baby. The verdict undoubtedly brought solace to Amanda's grieving family. Davey even went as far as to express his forgiveness toward his wife's killers.
Feel like forgiving. I feel like being angry. I feel like being mad. I feel like being frustrated. I feel like slipping into despair. But the problem with that is that doesn't lead down to any good road.
However, the irreplaceable loss of Amanda remains a permanent void. Sadly, Amanda's son Weston has had to grow up without the presence of his mother, having only been allowed to spend 15 months with her.
The hardest part for me in this whole process is thinking about him growing up without his mom. She poured out her life to serve people. Everything she did was oriented around loving Jesus, loving people.
Weston celebrated his 9th birthday this year and has been thriving under the care of his father, who has found a new path in life. In December 2017, 2 years after Amanda's tragic death, Davey entered into a new chapter by marrying Christy Monroy, a single mother who attended Resident Church and shared the same CrossFit gym with Davey. On November 4, 2019, Christy, who had a daughter named Natalia from her previous marriage, gave birth to Davey's son, Cohen David Parker Blackburn. Currently, the blended family is flourishing, as evident from their active social media presence and blog posts. Usually this would be the conclusion of our story. However, in this case, there are lingering unanswered questions and missing pieces of the puzzle that have left some people wondering if there's more to the story. Today, we will explore the alternate theories that have piqued people's curiosity, allowing you to form your own opinion. So without further delay, let's delve into the uncharted territory we've previously left unexplored. Before we proceed, we want to mention that most of this information is allegations or rumors, and Davey had never been under suspicion in the official investigation. We want to make it clear that we do not intend to spread misinformation or support any kind of propaganda. We apologize if anything we have said in this video has hurt somebody's feelings, as it is not our intention to do so. Some people believe that Davey might have been involved in his wife's murder, and he was the one who orchestrated it. Several factors have raised questions about his innocence. For starters, it was revealed that during the investigation, that just 2 months before Amanda's death, Davey had taken out a significant life insurance policy on her. Strangely, this policy came into effect after a mere 8 weeks. Coincidentally, right after Amanda's death. Davey benefited greatly from this. But was it intentional? No one knows. Coming back to the day of the home invasion, there were some unusual deviations in Davey's routine. Those familiar with Davey would attest that he typically left for the gym at 5:30 a.m., but on this particular day he was a half an hour late. His wake-up time was no different than usual, leaving some to wonder about the reason for this anomaly. Furthermore, his workouts typically spanned an hour, but on this occasion it lasted only 45 minutes, excluding the driving time. Additionally, some find it implausible that Davey would sit in his car for an entire hour without entering his home. In light of these anomalies, certain theories have emerged, speculating that he might have been waiting for his wife's tragic fate to unfold. The 911 call in this case is a matter that has drawn significant attention among web sleuths, and for good reason. There are several troubling aspects to it. First and foremost, the time it took Davey to call 911 is unusual. He waited for almost 12 minutes before seeking help, despite discovering his spouse in a severely injured state and covered in blood. This extended delay raises questions. Moreover, the most unsettling part of the 911 call is Davey's strangely composed demeanor. While on the call as the dispatcher connected to another line, Davey remained eerily silent.
She is. Okay, hold on. Stay on the line for EMS while I transfer you.
He made no effort to wake Amanda or communicate with her, even though he knew she was still breathing. This behavior is highly unusual, given the severity of the situation. It's equally perplexing that Davey initially thought Amanda had been in an accident, when in reality she had been viciously attacked and left for dead. These factors contribute to the mystery and speculation surrounding the case. There's another aspect of this case that has raised questions among some observers. They have pointed out how Davey appeared to be capitalizing on this tragedy. During Amanda's funeral, he continuously tweeted the hashtag #NothingIsWasted. Shortly after the funeral, he legally registered the domain name, Nothing Is Wasted, and even used that quote to brand her tombstone. He went on to release a podcast, a book, a blog, all under the same brand name, detailing his personal journey through Amanda's death and the healing process. Critics have pointed out that some of his statements and blog posts seem to revolve around himself, which has raised questions about potential narcissism. For instance, just hours after the arrest in the case, he released a statement in which he expressed rapid forgiveness for the individuals responsible for the death of his spouse.
Feel like forgiving. I feel like being angry. I feel like being mad. I feel like being frustrated. I feel like slipping into despair. But the problem with that is that doesn't lead down to any good road.
For some, the speed at which he chose to forgive those who had essentially torn his world apart was unsettling. His quote, "The best is yet to come," has led to speculation and discussions about Davey's motivations and behavior. Comparisons drawn from Davey's post have highlighted how he sometimes appears distant in his narratives. Some people have observed that he presents the murder in a very matter-of-fact way, and rarely mentions his unborn child, who tragically never had a chance to come into the world. On multiple occasions, Davey has expressed that while the incident has been painful for him, he wouldn't change any of it, and he believes that Amanda is where she needs to be, by Jesus' side. It's possible that Davey, as a man of faith, has accepted everything life has thrown his way, no matter how tragic. He might genuinely be grateful for the life he has been given, despite the immense losses he has suffered. However, whether coincidental or intentional, some of his behavior and statements have raised red flags for certain individuals. In a bizarre coincidence, just 2 weeks before Amanda's tragic death, Davey delivered a sermon in which he acted out a murder scene, repeatedly shooting someone in the back with an airsoft gun. This performance was intended to illustrate how worship could be metaphorically used as a weapon.
To sing, it became a weapon, don't worry, this is an airsoft gun, a weapon to battle worry. I thought we'd just have some fun with it. Come here, Zach, come on. Because sometimes you just need to be reminded. Dare, come hold my microphone. You just need to be reminded that when you get that phone call, instead of worrying about it, step over here, because I'm going to go crossways. Instead of worrying about it, maybe you need to worship. Boom. Instead of worrying about the medical bill, maybe you need to worship. Instead of, I missed right there, but it's okay if your worship misses. Just go again. Maybe instead of worrying so much about your kids, you need to lift it up and surrender it to Jesus in worship. Maybe instead of worrying about the job situation, you need to worship. Maybe instead of worrying about the project at school, you need to study and then worship. Maybe instead of worrying about what other people think about you, you need to worship.
If this video wasn't eerie enough, another incident left many people shocked. In 2018, Davey and his current wife Christy dressed as robbers for a Halloween party and even posted pictures on social media. What added to the unease was the presence of a ladder in the picture, bearing eerie similarities to the circumstances of Amanda's murder. This costume choice, coming just a few years after such a tragic event, raised numerous questions and concerns. Concerns have also been raised by some individuals regarding how swiftly authorities cleared Davey of suspicion. As a renowned local pastor with connections to influential figures and law enforcement, some believe that Davey was never thoroughly investigated. Additionally, theories began to circulate based on Davey and Amanda's own Q&A videos, in which they discussed their marital difficulties and how they overcame them to become soulmates.
Welcome Davey and Amanda to the stage for Q&A right now. Come on, let's go. Give it up. There you go. There you go.
Some people speculated that their marital problems led Davey to seek a way to eliminate his wife. However, it's important to note that while these theories sound like elements of a dark plot, they remain purely circumstantial and have never been substantiated. In fact, it's essential to acknowledge certain gaps in these theories, with a major one being, if Davey was involved in the murder, why did none of the individuals involved, Jalen, Deanna, or Larry, ever mention his name? Ultimately, we leave it to our audience to decide whether the truth lies in what's already known, or if there's something concealed beneath the surface, as we conclude our story here. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe Davey had any involvement in his wife's murder? Or do you consider these allegations to be entirely baseless, with the actual killer already behind bars?
You want to say something to your kids?
Mama, sorry.
Who raising your kids?
Me and my mom and dad.
You ain't raising shit. You on here in your back smoking crack. You ain't going home tomorrow. I'm going to keep you about a week.
Later, he would establish his total dominance.
Say it clear.
You want the master?
The video you witnessed is not from a movie or scripted. These are real people, victims who fell prey to a monster, 36-year-old Maury Travis. His crimes were so horrific that the police chief in the area ordered psychological counseling for anyone who had even watched the footage of his victims. He would lure victims into his basement, where he would subject them to unimaginable torture and bizarre rituals. What drove Maury Travis to commit such horrific crimes? How did he lure his victims into his basement without raising suspicion? The central character of today's story, Maury Travis, was born on October 25, 1965. He was known by the nickname Toby and lived with his mother Sandra Travis and his father Michael V. Travis in Carr Square, a public housing complex in St. Louis, Missouri. They later bought a house at 1001 Ford Avenue in Ferguson in April 1976. Maury Travis's childhood seemed relatively ordinary. While he was undeniably introverted and reserved, he was also known for his exceptional politeness and respect. Adults who interacted with him perceived him as someone who was highly mindful of etiquette and social norms. One teacher distinctly called Maury as an unusually quiet teenager, who even took the initiative to mow his neighbor's lawn. His demeanor at school was unremarkable, and those who knew him, including teachers, parents, and peers, never suspected him of being capable of violence. When police later interviewed individuals who attended school with Maury or lived near him, many of them didn't even recognize who he was. He didn't leave a memorable impression. In all of his childhood that is known to us, the separation of his parents was the only potential trauma that he may have experienced. He graduated from McClure High School in 1985 and served 2 years as an Army reservist. Following that, he worked as a medical and dental assistant. Additionally, he managed to secure employment locally with haulage companies and even volunteered at a local nursing home. Maury Travis's enrollment in Morris Brown College in 1986 at the age of 22 seemed like a positive step forward. However, it was also in this private institute in Atlanta where he encountered and formed a relationship with cocaine, sending his life into a downward spiral. His addiction quickly escalated to a severe level, costing him $300 a day. Maury's plunge into criminal activities to support his habit swiftly brought him to the attention of law enforcement the following year. Up until that point, he had a clean record, making his sudden shift into illegal behavior quite unexpected. Rather than a gradual escalation, his actions took a surprising and abrupt turn from his prior conduct. In March 1988, during his college spring break, Maury engaged in a string of robberies that raised eyebrows. To everyone's surprise, he targeted 5 shoe stores in St. Louis within 8 days. What added an unusual twist to these crimes was his choice of weapon. Instead of a loaded firearm, he used a plastic toy gun to instill fear. This abrupt shift into criminal behavior was truly unexpected, especially given his clean record prior to these incidents. This is where Maury Travis took a sharp turn into criminal activity. The armed robberies he committed resulted in his initial capture. Witnesses provided the police with details about his car, leading to his arrest. The detective handling the case was taken aback, as Maury didn't fit the typical image of a criminal. Upon being apprehended, Maury claimed to have hazy memories of the crimes, attributing it to drug influence. While awaiting sentencing, he underwent a drug rehabilitation program and claimed to have successfully overcome his addiction. Despite these efforts and his clean record before this, the court had taken his actions into account during proceedings. Character references poured in support of Maury, including one from a congressman and U.S. representative. These testimonials highlighted his rehabilitation efforts, asserting that his criminal behavior was an aberration in his character. Despite this acknowledgement, Maury received a 15-year prison sentence on July 5, 1989, at the age of 23. This marked the start of his time behind bars for his criminal actions. From the outset, Maury realized that his time in prison wouldn't be easy. He attested to the inhospitable conditions, citing frequent assaults and an abundance of drugs that posed a significant threat to his rehabilitation. Having successfully addressed his dependency issues, he found himself surrounded by drugs in this challenging environment. In a desperate plea to the judge, Maury wrote a letter, urging him to reconsider his sentence, pouring his heart out in the hope of a more lenient outcome. In his plea to the judge, Maury wrote on how he was constantly thinking of taking his own life due to the horrible conditions he is living in. He ended by asking the judge to give him another chance in society. Maury was granted parole in 1994, serving only 5 years and 3 months of his sentence at the Farmington Correctional Center. His early release was primarily attributed to his exemplary behavior. Although he had 13 conduct violations, they were minor infractions. Upon his release, he moved into a duplex where neighbors regarded him as an excellent resident who didn't cause any disturbances. After serving time initially from March 1989 through June 1994, Maury faced additional prison stays due to drug-related charges from February 1998 to January 1999 due to repeatedly violating his parole. Once outside prison, he worked in various restaurants, keeping to himself mostly. He also displayed an unusual fixation for his 2000 black Mitsubishi Eclipse, spending considerable time cleaning and maintaining it. Although neighbors and classmates of Maury didn't have any suspicious information about him, one of his former girlfriends had something different to say.
A boyfriend that I grew to love and wanted to marry and have his children. He told me he would really hurt me. He knew, "You don't know me, girl."
When he said, "You don't know me," did you think maybe I don't know him?
I knew to get the hell out of there. He was a very beautiful person. He was supportive, and he helped me build my self-esteem back up.
In March of 2001, Maury's girlfriend left him, and this was when bodies of women began to turn up around town. Between March 2001 and May 2002, Maury would actively pick up sex workers along the extended stretch of Broadway known as the Stroll, north of St. Louis. In fact, 4 suspected victims of Maury were later discovered in this area. It gained notoriety for its numerous crack houses and the availability of such workers. Maury would pick them up and then bring them back to his home in Ferguson. Once there, he would keep some of these women for days, subjecting them to his whims. However, it wasn't solely for his personal satisfaction. He recorded the horrifying events taking place in the basement. Videotapes documenting these acts were later discovered, concealed within a wall. Some of the video clips showed Maury engaging in consensual but rough roleplay involving bondage with women. There were also instances when he was seen using drugs, yet he would let them go unharmed. However, in other footage, Maury could be seen indulging in much darker activities, from keeping women hostage for days in his dungeon to strangling them to death. Law enforcement initially struggled to comprehend why he chose to spare certain women while murdering others. One hypothesis suggests that the tipping point might have been when he discovered that a particular sex worker had children. It appeared that this discovery triggered a violent rage in him, since they chose drugs over their children. Although it's not confirmed, that's the association they've drawn.
You want to say something to your kids?
Mama, sorry.
Who raising your kids?
Me and my mom and dad.
You ain't raising shit. You on here in your back smoking crack. You ain't going home tomorrow. I'm going to keep you about a week.
Later, he would establish his total dominance.
Say it clear.
You want the master?
He also made them perform the most unbelievable rituals. Maury would get them to dance in white clothes. Then at times, he'd get them to wear sunglasses where the lenses were completely blacked out, so they couldn't see. By doing this, he was taking power away from them completely. He would then restrain their legs with a rope and handcuff them. At times, he'd even cover their eyes with duct tape. In the footage that they found, they saw these women shackled to a wooden post with Maury verbally taunting them. He would tell them what was going to happen, or they needed to berate them as well. At times, he'd get angry because he'd find out that these women had children. He also used to criticize them, expressing aggression and violence due to their choice of drugs over their kids.
I can't hear you what you're saying. Say it clear.
You want the master that pleases me to serve you. You are the master that pleases me to serve you.
Stop for it.
You are the master that pleases me to serve you.
Now you sit your ass down like I said.
In some of the earliest footage, Maury is actually seen standing over a kneeling naked woman, heavily bound with a rope and handcuffed. Then he suddenly grabs the belt, snaps it tightly around her neck, and strangles her until she's unconscious and she's limp. He may even have broken her neck. He then just leaves her body face down on the floor. It's truly horrifying to think that Maury Travis was able to carry out such horrific crimes without raising suspicion. One thing we know is Maury Travis's ability to blend into the background made him a master of disguise. His unassuming nature allowed him to operate unnoticed, making him the last person anyone would suspect of such heinous crimes. On July 31, 2000, the discovery of the first known victim, Mary Shields, 61, in East St. Louis, Illinois, began a haunting pattern. In the months that followed, the tragedies escalated. On March 24, 2001, the body of Cassandra F. Walker, 19, was found in Washington Park, Illinois. Alyssa Greenway, a 34-year-old caught in a seemingly hopeless cycle of addiction, was discovered deceased on April 1, 2001, in Washington Park, Illinois. Her body showed signs of strangulation, with ligature marks found on her wrist and ankles. Near her body, authorities found a tire impression, identified as a Bridgestone Potenza tire, which was photographed for further analysis. Not long after, on May 15, 2001, Teresa Wilson, 36, was discovered in West Alton, Missouri. May 30, 2001, marked the discovery of Betty James, 46, in St. Louis, with an evident tire impression distinct from earlier scenes. The St. Louis Police Department strongly believed that all these murders were the work of the same individual. as the crimes were executed in a similar manner. By June 29, 2001, Verona Thompson, 36, was found in West Alton, Missouri. Following this, on August 25, 2001, Yvonne Cruz, 50, was discovered in East St. Louis, Illinois. The haunting silence after October 8, 2001, when Brenda Beasley, aged 33, was found dead in East St. Louis, Illinois, raised speculation. Authorities speculated 3 possible scenarios. Either the perpetrator was in custody, had passed away, or had relocated from the area. However, the unsettling quiet broke as the year changed. The cycle resumed, claiming 4 more lives. The first unidentified victim was found on January 30, 2002. Another unidentified victim was found near Muscatoa, Illinois, on March 11, 2002. The next unidentified victim was discovered in Columbia, Illinois, on March 28, 2002. And the final unidentified victim was reported in West Alton, Missouri, on May 25, 2002. Each day marked a sorrowful moment, revealing a frightening pattern. What ultimately led to uncovering the killer will stun you like never before. In an attempt to bring attention to one of the victims and maintain public interest in the investigation, Bill Smith penned an article. This was about Teresa Wilson, a victim, and her life struggles leading up to her unfortunate demise. He named the killer the Streetwalker Strangler. The article was published in the paper's May 19, 2002 issue.
What I think I ended up doing was humanizing this woman who, in a way, had kind of dehumanized her own life by getting involved in prostitution and drug activities.
Less than a week later, Smith received a letter at his desk. While it's not uncommon for media personnel to receive letters or correspondence, this letter had an unusual return address on the envelope. I Thraldom, 325, 331 Lafayette Street, New York, New York, 10012. The letter bore a St. Louis postmark, indicating it had been mailed locally. The zip code 10012 encompasses portions of Manhattan's Soho, NoHo, Nolita, and Greenwich Village neighborhoods. The letter bore a St. Louis postmark, indicating it had been mailed locally. However, the I Thraldom address is fictional. So why would someone use that term for an address? According to Merriam-Webster, thraldom refers to the state of being an enslaved person. It also served as the name of a bondage website. The letter was typed using what appeared to be Lucida handwriting font in red ink, with minimal punctuation. Smith initially believed it was a prank. He quickly realized the letter was no joke, and that a person claiming to be the Streetwalker Strangler was contacting him. The letter read, Dear Bill, nice sob story about Teresa Wilson. Write one about Greenwade, write a good one, and I'll tell you where many others are to prove I'm real. Here's directions to number 17. Search in a 50-yard radius from the X. Put the story in the Sunday paper like the last. The letter Bill received included a map of West Alton, marked with an X, indicating the location of a body. The sender offered to reveal the locations of additional victims and, as evidence of their identity, provided directions to number 17, accompanied by a typed internet-generated map. After finding a skeleton at the marked spot, authorities focused on the map, which appeared to have been generated using an internet mapping service. They found a possible match on Expedia.com, according to an affidavit by FBI agent Melanie Jimenez. On May 30, 2002, Expedia informed Jimenez that Microsoft, based in Redmond, Washington, provided the data for its map site. The FBI requested records of any maps of West Alton made between May 18, 2002, the date of the newspaper story that prompted the letter, and May 21, 2002, the postmark on the envelope. It took 4 days to receive a response. On June 3, 2002, Microsoft reported that only one computer had accessed the map during the specified time period. The company further revealed that on May 20th, the computer had zoomed in on the map of the West Alton, Missouri area approximately 10 times in chronological order, eventually generating a map that matched the one sent to the Post-Dispatch. However, Microsoft could not provide a name, only an IP address. a meaningless string of numbers to most people, 65.227.106.78. To translate the IP number into a name, the FBI turned to WorldCom Incorporated, which provided local telephone numbers to connect internet services to their dial-up customers. WorldCom assigns a temporary IP address to each customer for each internet session. The challenge was not just to identify who used 65.227.106.78, but also to determine who used it at the specific time in question. The next day on June 4, 2022, WorldCom's Internet Division, UUNet, identified the user as MSN/Maury Travis. This led to the identification of the user's real name, Maury Troy Travis of Ferguson. Before this, back in 2001, Maury also hinted about his crime to one of his co-workers. He told him that East St. Louis was a good place to hide objects due to minimal police presence. He also told his co-worker's girlfriend, who worked at a TV station, that prostitutes' bodies were dumped in the same area. Maury didn't state that he was the one who killed them, but he said he knew about it from a friend. The taunting letter to the editor and his hints to co-workers suggest that Maury might have been one of those serial killers who craved attention. His actions indicate a desire to be found, a twisted sense of power derived from the fear he instilled in the community. This information provided the basis for surveillance, and on June 7, 2002, an arrest and search warrant.
I knocked, I said FBI, we have a search warrant. I announced at least 3 times.
The warrant led to the discovery of evidence, including DNA and tire tread marks, linking Maury, a 36-year-old waiter, to some of the killings.
Mr. Shorts, the first thing out of his mouth was, "It's 7 o'clock in the morning." And you're right, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. And we're serving a federal search warrant. Okay, why are you here? And our response was, "You know why we're here." He dropped his head. He said, "Yeah, I know why you're here."
Investigators launched a thorough search of Maury's residence in Ferguson, Missouri, uncovering a horrifying scene. Hidden within the depths of his home, they discovered a torture chamber. The ground floor of his home was tidy and well maintained. The woman who lived with him, identified as his girlfriend, told police she had no clue about the basement and had never been there. While police officers examined the house and basement, FBI agents and other investigators conducted a 2-hour interrogation of Maury in his living room. They learned that his mother owned the residence and had allowed him to stay there. Authorities later revealed that Maury evaded giving direct answers and instead inquired about how they had located him. Upon being informed that the computer-printed map had led them to his doorstep, Maury became enraged. Shortly after, police escorted Maury outside and placed him in a car. He consented to accompanying the police downtown for further questioning. Computer forensics experts entered the house to inspect Maury's computer, where they uncovered drafts of the letter sent to journalist Bill Smith. Downstairs, investigators uncovered a house of horrors. They found bloodstains on the walls and on the ceiling and on the carpet and furniture as well. Within this, they discovered chilling torture instruments, a menacing stun gun, and newspaper clippings documenting his heinous crimes. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Videotapes capturing Maury's unspeakable acts of violence, subjecting his victims to horrific acts. The evidence from this torture chamber, coupled with DNA analysis, suggested that he committed the murders of between 12 and 20 women. He had been preying on vulnerable individuals, many of whom were drug addicts and sex workers, in the states of Missouri and Illinois between 2000 and 2022. Travis asked for a soda during questioning. Later, the can he drank from was sent to the lab for testing. DNA swabs were taken from the area near the opening of the can for epithelial cells in Travis's saliva, which could be used for DNA testing. Travis's DNA profile was then compared to the biological material found on 2 of the murder victims, Yvonne Cruz and Brenda Beasley. St. Louis Police Captain Harry Heger said that the investigators also found a crude diagram in Maury's home, showing plans for a basement extension. Heger said that Maury was planning to build 2 cells in the basement, where he could chain the women, and then he was planning to build vents connecting the basement to the outside. Heger said that Maury also made a list of things that he needed to keep the woman captive for some time, and that one of the items on the list was adult diapers. We spoke about the victims who were identified, but now let us uncover a few who are not known till the present. On May 25, 2002, the tragic case of St. Charles County Jane Doe came to light, adding another victim to the list of serial killer Maury Travis. The woman's remains were discovered near West Alton, Missouri, leaving her identity shrouded in mystery for 21 years. The discovery of St. Charles County Jane Doe unfolded following the anonymous letter sent to local reporter Bill Smith on May 21, 2002. The skeletal remains of St. Charles County Jane Doe were found west of Highway 67 and south of St. Charles Street, scattered over a 30-foot wide area. It was determined that she was a female between the ages of 25 and 35, of black ethnicity, and approximately 5'4" in height. One or more limbs and one or both hands were not recovered. The remains found at the crime scene included a sleeveless coarse blues denim dress with metal buttons, a black and silver V-neck stretch shirt with 3/4-length sleeves, a black spandex top, a torn piece of blue jean-type material, a white cotton tube sock, a blue shoestring-type tie-up in the back, and a thin white cotton fragment. A few months prior, on March 28, 2002, another discovery had been made: the remains of an unidentified woman. She would come to be known as Monroe County Jane Doe, one of the 3 victims of the notorious St. Louis serial killer, Maury Travis. Her identity remains a mystery, her story shrouded in silence. She was believed to be between the ages of 29 and 50, her African American heritage evident in her skin tone. She stood at 5 feet 1 inch tall. Her petite frame weighed about 105 pounds. Her dark brown hair bore the mark of a healed fracture on her forehead, possibly a mark of a childhood injury. There was no indication that she had ever given birth. At the time of her discovery, they could find only skeletal remains, along with a green shirt and the letter M and the word Mavericks in orange lettering. Her attire was completed by khaki canvas shorts and a brown leather belt with a silver buckle. These simple garments provided the only clues to her identity, silent witnesses to her life. Just a few weeks before that, on March 11, 2002, in Marine, Illinois, the remains of Madison County Jane Doe were found. Madison County Jane Doe was believed to be between the ages of 23 and 30. Her ethnicity identified as black. Her height was estimated to be between 5'1" and 5'6", and she weighed around 105 pounds. She also had dark hair. When discovered, the victim's decomposed body was clad in a red and white checkered flannel-style shirt, bearing the brand Tommy Hilfiger, and a pair of gray shorts from the brand Second Skins. A little under 2 months before that, St. Clair County Jane Doe, a woman whose identity remains a mystery, was discovered on January 30, 2002. Her skeletal remains were found in Mascota, Illinois, though the exact cause of her death remains undetermined. She is presumed to be one of the unidentified victims of serial killer Maury Travis. At the time of her discovery, she was believed to be between the ages of 20 and 40, of African American descent. Her skeletal remains revealed clues about her life, including 3 piercings in her right ear, a healed fracture above her left ankle, and additional healed fractures on her nasal bones, left second rib, wrist, and below her neck. She was found wearing a black velour sleeveless catsuit, bearing the brand Jason Matthews, with full-length legs. 2 yellow metal rings adorned her left middle finger. People were shocked and confused by how a man with such an appealing personality could be involved in these terrible crimes. The mother of one of his ex-girlfriends from Pagedale expressed her shock and disbelief over the news of Maury's arrest. Her daughter had dated him back in 2001, and she described him as a perfect gentleman, who always seemed happy and laid back. She couldn't believe that the man she knew could be different from the person now accused of such heinous crimes. Maury was suspected of being involved in the murders of 12 women, and he was also charged with 2 counts of kidnapping. Federal court documents linked him to these crimes. Police investigators believed that Maury may have killed more than 17 women in total, Following his arrest on June 7, 2002, Maury was taken into custody for interrogation and was placed on preventative monitoring until his trial for the alleged offenses. Just when St. Louis thought justice had been served with Maury's arrest on June 7, 2002, the city saw darkness again. 3 days later, on June 10, 2002, Maury planned to escape his sentence. He did that in the most unthinkable way possible. Maury Travis reportedly wrote a brief note on a sheet of paper in his 8th floor jail cell in Clayton. Outside the cell, another inmate tasked with monitoring Maury attempted to keep watch through a window. Maury had no desire to spend the rest of his life in prison or face execution by injection. He conveyed to those who would read his final words. Instead, he decided to end his life on his own terms. He explained that he left the note to demonstrate, "You guys didn't kill me." His note read, "Dear Mom, I'm sorry for the pain this caused you and the family. My death seems to be the only way out and a fast end to all the publicity. You were the best mother a man could have, but I've been sick for a long time, sick in the head, since I was about 14. I don't know why, I was just sick. I've never felt normal or happy at any time in my life. I think about the life I lead and what's ahead of me. This seems the best solution for all involved, especially me, because I won't spend the rest of my life locked up, or worse, let them kill me with a needle. Tell Grandma, Marina, James, and everybody, I love them dearly. I love you the most, but you know that. Forever your son, Toby Travis." Jail regulations prohibited the inmate assigned to the anti-self-harm vigil from maintaining a clear view of what was to transpire, and the guards, violating jail rules, skipped 2 15-minute checks, providing Maury with 45 minutes of privacy to carry out his plan.
To say that I was angry and to say that people in the newsroom were angry about it and that the community was angry about it is really an understatement. I think people were furious, and the families of those women should have been furious. That absolutely no way should have ever been allowed to happen.
When Mr. Travis hung himself, he took all the answers with him.
According to Clayton police, Maury meticulously threaded a torn strip of bedsheet through small holes in a jail wall vent, 6 feet from the floor, and looped the other end around his neck. He placed a pillowcase over his head, stuffed additional cloth into his mouth, and somehow managed to tie his hands behind his back.
I think it's amazing that it's such an incredible tool that through analyzing the computer, we were able to catch someone that was committing crimes like this.
12 years after Maury himself died in prison, his mother, Sandra Travis, still owned the home where he committed his horrific acts in 2014. She rented the home to Katrina McGaw, without mentioning the house's dark past. McGaw learned about the house's history from a television documentary and requested to break her lease, but Sandra refused. News 4 contacted Sandra, who claimed she had informed McGaw about the house's past. McGaw denied this, stating she would have remembered the murders if Sandra had told her. Technically, landlords are not obligated to disclose information about a home's past. In this country, landlords are only required to report physical defects. The St. Louis Housing Authority intervened, allowing McGaw to move out at the end of the month, despite Sandra's objections. The situation was complex. On one hand, it was understandable that Sandra, the mother of a serial killer, would want to put the past behind her. She was legally entitled to rent the house without disclosing any information about past events, but it may not be ethically right to do so. On the other hand, McGaw, who had a 2-year-old daughter, was uncomfortable living in a house where women were tortured and murdered. She also mentioned that her daughter had been occasionally playing near the same pool in the basement where Maury Travis tied up his victims. Considering how disturbing the whole situation was, McGaw understandably wanted to move out as soon as possible. Sadly, the victims found no closure. Moreover, several victims remain unidentified, adding to the heartbreak of this case. After witnessing these tragic events, one thing becomes evident. You never truly know who lives next door. This monstrous individual was carrying out these heinous acts right beneath everyone's noses, escaping notice even from those close to him. What's truly confounding is the mystery surrounding his actions. How could he commit 17 murders in his basement without anyone suspecting a thing? Not even the woman he dated. And then, the ultimate enigma. Why did he choose to end his own life in that prison cell? Was the prison reality more horrific than the agony these women faced? Or was he such a narcissist that he couldn't bear anyone else deciding when his life would end?